Broadcasting from coast to coast, country to country. Welcome to Midnight After Dark. It's Tuesday. Welcome back to the show. I got friends with me here. We got stories to talk about. And I want to welcome all of you in the chat. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of this. Hit that like button, hit that share button. Let everybody know that we're live. We've got with us tonight the one, the only Script Doctor. How you doing, my friend?
I'm holding in there. I'm a great video you guys dropped just before the show. Well done, guys.
By the skin of our teeth, tell you what. I gotta ask, how hot is it up there? Because I'm dealing with 90-degree tornado weather down here.
It's been averaging around 20 degrees Celsius, so that's
I'm talking
around,
Fahrenheit, so yeah.
Yeah, that's like 60 something.
Oh, so you're all right still. No, we got a heat wave come in. All of a sudden, I got a tornado warning before the show. Yeah. So hopefully, I don't have to deal with it.
I hope you don't have to deal with it. I mean, sudden weather changes in pressure and heat and cold do cause tornadoes. So, yeah, I'm hoping.
It's been because it heated up quickly.
Yeah. No, it was been a beautiful day today. I spent as much time outside as I could without compromising my employment, and we're getting normal weather, which is fantastic for Canada. We only get this for a couple of weeks of the year, so.
Yeah. Well, two individuals who are probably getting weather similar to mine would be Six. How are you doing tonight?
It's hot as fuck.
Isn't it?
The Midwest sucks right now. It's like 89 degrees.
Yeah, I figured you were getting pretty much the same shit I was, and Nick probably as well, I'm assuming. How you doing, Nick Weiser?
Despite the batshit hot weather over here in Illinois, I am doing great today. It's been a really bizarre weekend with my YouTube channel. I've seen the subs go up and down, and then somehow in the midst of all of it, I got monetized somehow. So
yay! Congratulations!
That's awesome.
It's really weird. And it's funny because if you still look at the sub count, it went back down and it went back up again. It's at like 980 something. And I'm like, how did it get approved? I don't know, but okay, cool. So of course I'm going to take advantage of that. So
yeah, well, you got to be careful. You got to be mindful because if there's ever a sub surge, YouTube has to do a sub purge because they usually suspect foul play.
Of course.
So
of course.
But congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, it feels good, and I've had people tell me, "Oh, it's just them going through the subs. Like, give it a few days, and most of them will probably be back up." And I don't know if it's true or not, but whatever. Either way, I'll be back at 1,000 in a day or two, so it's all good. And I'm ready to just hit the next level with all this fun. And I'm ready to talk about these subjects tonight. And before we do, as I want to say with Script Set, like Tom, that was great video. You and Andre really made that one happen. I love what you guys do over at ME.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I've been hearing some random stuff like that video is probably the closest of what we can probably say that we know right now is that they're looking at people to replace him, but chances are they're not going to Back to the Future Ezra out of Flashpoint. They can't economically do it.
Well, how big of a bomb do they want to have, really? Because right now it's like, okay, we know we're not going to make the money we want on this movie due to the press. Doesn't matter how far out we push out the film. We know it's not going to happen. So do we want to risk trying to make a movie people will actually go to see and have the budget basically double and then pretty much skew our possibility of a profit? Or should we just let it ride and recast the character with a different actor for the sequels that they are speculating of trying to get pushed through? Because I think they're trying to go for Flash 2 and 3 after this.
That's what or at least they have to have the character involved in something, because almost every version I've heard, no matter which one it is, they all end on this cliffhanger deal, right? So
yes, it ends on a cliffhanger. Ezra Miller, like I mentioned this even before even the consideration of recasting occurred, is that Ezra Miller plays multiple versions of himself. So yeah, you cannot, you can reshoot it, but you're doubling your budget. And at this point here, that's Warner Brothers, Zaslav, his whole team cannot afford to have a slew of failures financially when they have to try and create $3 billion in synergies. So this one is probably going to be a loss leader film. They're probably going to be looking at it that way. and I would not be surprised if it's a string of them, because they're not doing well in the court of public opinion with their casting, or with the existing cast that was brought to them by good old Zack Snyder. You know, you definitely can argue Hamada and Jeff Johns and Watts kept them, but you know, they wouldn't have been there in the first place if the other guy didn't lobby for them and fight hard for them initially. So I'm just gonna throw that out there for all you DC fans.
Does anyone else hear music?
Yeah, I put some low-fi music on.
Okay.
I like
Sorry.
I like
Just from the intro,
I'm like looking at all my tabs, trying to figure out where it's coming from.
I'm sorry, I should have said something, but no, I just figured it'd be kind of nice to just get us into the show.
Yeah.
Well, whoever they do pick, I hope they get either a blonde actor or an actor willing to dye their hair blonde, because Barry Allen is a blonde, and he's only been played by dark-haired actors.
Isn't that ironic?
In live action for his entire existence.
They're all brunettes on live action, yet historically he's always been a blonde. Like,
yeah. Well, it's the
so
same thing with
weird.
redheads too. But here's the thing, script. I mean, we have no clue actually who they're looking at, but we've had a few rumors now, and all those rumors seem to be Ezra Miller-like individuals. Yep. Let's say so.
Lateral quality actors from basically your teen.
Well, I meant more like look-wise too.
Oh yeah, but like they're coming from like your MTV type of stuff, like Teen Wolf, Riverdale, basically those types of quality, quote unquote, outlets, because they want to drive in. It's kind of ironic, actually. Warner Brothers, and I learned this last week. Warner Brothers is trying to expand their audience on their tentpole films to reach female viewers, because they haven't been getting them comparatively. And then the inverse is that Disney is trying to expand their stuff to male viewers, because they haven't been getting them. And they're both formulas that they're doing is actually warding off the very demographic they're trying to appeal to. So it's quite interesting to see how backwards the experience. I mean, these are experienced people at the top of these studios. They got there for a number of reasons, not nepotism possibly one of them, but they're able to maintain those positions because they're rather successful in other areas. But it's clearly showing how disconnected they are to their core audience, because of, I argue, the introduction of social media as a metric for gauging anything, which I think is a bad metric.
And I hate to say it, Wild Rose, as a woman, Ezra probably wouldn't find you remotely appealing either. He'd throw a chair at you, though.
He's a weird looking person. Like, he looks like he has an artificially, like a reconstructed jawline, because his cheeks look more
he
cartoony
has unique features,
than human.
let's say, and that lends him to being an actor. But
he has beady eyes.
Basically what I heard, because I checked back in during the video to see if there was anything else going on, and the same thing I got back was, likely they're not going to shoot anybody else for the Flash. They keep hearing that options are open for who will be the Flash in the future, but they're not as worried about that as they are as Amber Heard right now. That's what I heard. And that's a more fixable situation, it sounds like, because Ezra, to me, basically what I got out of the conversation was more so they're banking on Michael Keaton selling the Flash more than Ezra anyway.
Do you think that if they reshoot or recast Ezra and recast Amber Heard, is that setting a precedent? And so that every time an actor screws up, is it going to become less and less things that they have to do in order for them to be replaced? Are people going to start expecting that?
The threshold here is basically being convicted and not in the court of public opinion, but actually like facing some legitimate threshold parts. Like, for instance, I mean, hypothetically speaking, if I were in a position where, Mr. Depp wanted to work with me on, say, a franchise thing that he really loved, I would actually, in order to secure that he feels comfortable and build a relationship, I would have no problem securing in a contract that unless he commits an egregious crime where he is tried and convicted by a jury of his peers, he's not losing that role. Because that's the only way you can do it, because right now the court of public opinion is what cost him his initial jobs and whatnot. And this
because he was never convicted of anything. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what this whole trial is about. So you really have to do that. Now, with regards to Mr. Ezra Miller, he pled no contest to one set of charges. He's got another set of charges that has to be brought up at court, and the scuttlebutt at Warner Brothers from a couple of friends of mine is that he's not coming back for any sequels, that's for sure. But if he does one more thing, he's not ever going to be offered. He's going to have like a no-go deal, 100% for anything Warner Brothers affiliated.
And as we learned from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation, I wish I could remember that guy's first name, but his last name is Mark or Marks. But he was he's done all kinds of shit in Hollywood, and he was talking about how now they have these clauses in the contracts where they can just get rid of somebody if they are deemed a problem. So like, it's not like it used to be to where it was a little harder to get rid of somebody. It's a lot easier now to get rid of somebody. But I think you're right, Six. That's a good question to be asked, is what kind of precedent does it set? And that's what I keep getting from the guys and gals I talk to, is basically that it's a whole different animal when it comes to Amber compared to Ezra, just because of the weight they hold in the film. You have the star in multiple roles in one, comparative to, you know, a secondary character who we've heard various reports how much they're in the film and how much of a part they really play in it. So again, that's what I keep hearing, is the Amber situation, if that goes south, that's a quick fix, and that would more than likely make sense that they would replace her. Ezra, on the other hand, you are looking at such it just, they'd be better off not releasing the film at all at that point, because like Script said, I mean, it cost them 25% of their budget to reshoot Back to the Future in 1985 just to shoot the scenes with Michael J. Fox. You're looking at something threefold over, and I think Script is right when you say doubling the budget. I think you're about right. I can't see that not being the case, because even when you got to fix other scenes, you're looking at special effects shots and other things, are pulling in an actor again, and all that shit costs extra money that you got to fold into the budget. So there's
like
no
instance,
easy
like,
out here with Ezra.
If they did like for today's model with special effects, it's actually easier to replace the digital image of the actor you're doing the special effects for than it is to just reshoot it. So they would be saving money there, but that's penance compared to
it still costs money, is my point. Either way you look at it.
Yeah, because he's in so much of the film, it's basically a non-starter. It's like, okay, you're out. Now with Six, you do pose a good question, because I think there used to be a precedent up until the early 90s where anything you did as a celebrity, like talent-wise, actor, producer, director, that would cause a ethical controversy, so to speak, with regards to like the values of so say like the West, so to speak, to want to be abstract on it, would get you in a lot of trouble. Because the one of the things that classic Hollywood loved is the fact that their celebrities kind of represented the success and moral of America, the American dream, and they behaved as such. But of course, that's how it was presented publicly. In private, they were just as messed up as anybody else, if not more in some regards. Having a consequence for your actions and to a job would be a great shock to the talent pool, because it basically says you should be very lucky to be where you are. You should be very grateful and humbled to be where you are. And just because you're popular and you have a lot of money and people do bend over backwards for your attention and to be involved with you, doesn't give you the agency to abuse that power. So, we catch you abusing it, you're out, because you clearly don't have the responsibility to deserve it. That's actually a fine precedent to have. The thing is like, what's the threshold? And is it going to be a precedent held up by, say, the masses on social media, or is it going to be something a bit more in line with just a basic level of decent behavior that allows for minor indiscretions that are proven to do zero harm to anyone else other than the individual?
I believe it was called the morality clause. Yes, Joker. And it's similar now, to my understanding, but it's more drastic. Like they can, like back then it was more of, well, depending on the situation, and like Script was saying, I think the bigger thing was, like even then, like a lot of times they'd give a lot of the actors and directors and people in the industry, musicians, the benefit of the doubt until the actual case was over with. It really wasn't until more recent years where the court of public opinion became more of a thing. And I believe social media and the internet and all that
Well,
played
I
a
would
big
say
role in that. But
the
yeah,
court of public opinion was always a thing. It's
not
amplified.
in exactly
It's
the
amplified
amplification.
in social media because now everyone has that means to partake in a voice. Where prior it was you have the court of public opinion, so a couple of the trashy entertainment television shows would talk about it, and a couple of the rags would talk about it. But now because of social media and because the desperation of larger media corporations needing the attention, the views, the clicks, whatever they can to get money, it doesn't even matter whether it's considered high or low brow. It's like we'll just run with it so we can at least get that portion of that audience to interact with our paper, our magazine, or whatever. And then to heck with whether or not it's good or not, we can always print a retraction that nobody will read anyways, but it'll keep us above board on the law side of things. Like that's the horrible attitude that social media has really just elevated and exploded over the last decade.
Well, and it used to be easy to determine what was the trash. It was the magazines you'd see at the checkout, the Star
Right.
magazine and Globe. And now, well, I saw it on the internet, so it must be true. Oh, well, I saw it on TikTok, it must be true. No,
Yeah, and most people
no.
don't know the difference between Page Six and Variety,
Right,
and
right.
and even things like the Washington Post and other things that used to be maybe considered a little bit more reputable aren't anymore, and stuff of that sort. But we got some super chats here, so let's get to those, and then we'll get into the main topics of the day. Night of Snoke sent in $1, and then he had a question and said, "Script, do you happen to know the showrunner of CW Legends of Tomorrow seemed to, after a few seasons, stop bringing in DC characters, instead made for TV versions?" And then he had more
Most of the
to it.
showrunners
Yes.
of anything on CW have blocked me on Twitter. They
Of
really don't
course.
like me, and they don't like me because I've just posed
I'm just trying to find the
normal
second half of
normal
it. Here it is.
questions.
Because he heard
and
two sides saying they didn't have rights to certain characters, and the other side says they did have rights to the characters. Oh, Warner Brothers has all the rights in the world to
Yes.
the characters. It's just people whoever's in charge of DC at that time, whether or not they want to allow them usage of. Like a great example is they don't. One of the big number one rules is Batman don't go on TV, not
Well,
live action.
that's
anyway.
it's not a real rule. It's just they
Like
think
an
they can make
unwritten
more
rule.
money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they won't allow people to just throw Batman on TV.
And the other part too is that Warner Brothers has an umbrella rights deal with DC, but there are individual producers that have film and television rights under that deal. So like Michael Uslan, for starters, he has the rights to Batman.
That's a
on
good
film.
point too. Yeah,
But like he's got a very secure contract with Warner Brothers on that. So whoever if Michael Uslan decides to sell the Batman rights to someone else, the contract with Warner Brothers would go on that. I would presume would go with that as well. When it comes to the DC part, the only stipulation that Warner Brothers has that I know of is basically they want to avoid cross contamination or divergence of their IPs. So if you have, say, Superman in television, they would like to try and make sure that when Superman is doing a movie, there's a buffer between them, so that audiences know it's not the one that they see on television, and it's not the one that they would see on film. There's a great story with Christopher Reeve, because he was going to do a fifth Superman film, and he liked the premise, and this was before the accident. But one of the things that kind of delayed it was the television show Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, because I believe ABC had the television rights for that, and Warner Brothers did not want to spend money on a feature film that could benefit or deter their audience. Drive and a bigger audience to the ABC time slot for that show, where they had a television show that they were doing up on against at the same time, even though they'd be making money off of the profits of the ABC show, because it wasn't solely theirs. That caused a conflict of interest. So they were trying
and they
to
even made sure that
for that. Yeah,
they even made sure that they didn't get in the way of things like in the comic and such too. Like
Oh,
the
yeah,
death of Superman was more of an accidental, huge.
it was
big
out
deal.
of desperation because they wanted to line it up with the television show.
Exactly, and that's the humor of it all, is that became like kind of like this big seminal moment in comic books, when it was really just a throwaway moment just so they could buy some time.
It was yeah, they were going to do it in, I think, 94 is when they were originally going to do
I can't remember
wedding.
who said it, but yeah.
They're going to do the wedding in 94, but that was the third season.
Yep.
Or just the start of the third season of that Superman show. And someone at DC said, hey, we really, like, on the comic book side of things, there's no conflict there because the books have been around for 60 odd years at that time. Let's line up the books with the show, since the sales are correlating at that time. And it was really up to the writers. Like, well, we want to get them married in season 3, and the comic book guys were like, well, we have the wedding ish series almost ready to go, but it's going to come out before season 3 does. And so DC writers were told you have to delay by 1 year. So that's when they came up with let's just kill Superman.
Which in that same, I can't remember who told the story that I heard the version of it, but they said like, yeah, that's pretty much what you just said. And whoever it was, because some guy in the room always threw out the joke, let's just kill him.
Yeah, he did that for 5 years straight.
Yeah, for 5 years straight. He like, well, what are we gonna do this year? Let's just kill him. That's like, it was like this ongoing joke. So at the moment of this, revelation that they had to delay this big wedding deal.
It was a wedding arc, which is like about 12 issues, I think.
So they're like, so he just pops up, let's just kill him.
And they're like, okay.
Then this time everybody turned to him and he goes, you know what? That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, and that's after a lot of stuff because originally the showrunner, which was Deborah Joy Levine, she wrote the first season with her writing team, and it was such a hit show after that first season, but someone at ABC's like, we need it to be more action oriented because it's Superman. And so they dismissed her and her writing staff and brought in Robert Singer and a bunch of his guys. And then the show just started to go downhill for every subsequent season.
That's where it went off the rails. But no, another example of that, of what you're talking about though, and sorry, I didn't mean to interject earlier before, but
go for it. No.
The whole reason why they won't bring in Grant Gustin is the Flash, or Gustin, or however you say his last name.
Grant Gustin is So it goes back to the CW quality of actors. They don't have a film presence, unfortunately. And on top of that, you're asking an actor who's great for stage and decent for television to try and hold a film that he's not really done on that level. And I don't mean to offend him or anything. He's got more growing to do.
And let's say that, TV actors can't move on to film, but here's the other side of it too. Beyond that is the confusion aspect, because if he were to come into the movies, he wouldn't be playing the Flash that he was playing on TV. That's the thing that would confuse viewers.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers would want to. That's kind of more what I heard, is they just don't.
I'm not
want
saying
the
like
confusion.
TV actors can't elevate to film. They can. It's just that the level of quality that the people at CW pick are not the ones that elevate.
Like Dr. Coffindale says, someone
script. I want to ask you, because I mean, obviously, I was a fan of the first few seasons of The Flash. Would you feel like if Grant had better material to work with, he could maybe shine better as an actor on I guess you could say, the silver screen, or is he just really the actor who's strictly just TV material, even if he had better material?
Okay, so my opinion, I think he's a show tunes actor. He should be on stage in musicals. He doesn't have TV stuff. It's no bright on him. It's like you really should be going where you shine. And I would no problem with him doing more TV, but he needs better directors. He needs people to actually push him for acting wise. He's so dedicated to the craft. He doesn't stretch outside of his singing, dancing, and basic acting. Like I've been a big fan of Lucas Till for a while to be the Flash, because when he speaks on episodes of, at least the early episodes of MacGyver, I haven't been watching it much, I know he looked up the definition of the words he had to say, and just to know how to say them properly and understand what they mean in relation to the rest of the words he's saying in his line. Grant Gustin doesn't, and you can tell because it's very flat and monotone. Where like a guy like Lucas Till, who looks a lot like Barry Allen in the comics, who played Havoc in X-Men First Class, you could tell that he actually was like, oh, I don't know what this word is. I'm going to look it up. Oh, and I don't understand what it is I'm doing. So I'm going to like start research on the internet exactly what it is MacGyver's doing in this scene so that I can convincingly try and pull this off. And it's, at least in those early 2 seasons that I saw, I was like impressed. I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. He hasn't done anything or said anything stupid or in a stupid way that took me out of the show. He actually like allowed me to invest into it. Now, don't get me wrong, the MacGyver show is not great, but there are some standout performances in that. And he's kind of one of them. But yeah, I kind of wish that when it came to like Warner Brothers on their television side of things, they looked at actors the same way they did in the 80s and 90s, where they managed to get Bruce Willis, who like wowed people on Moonlighting, and then he just boomed into the movies. And same thing with like Robert Culp and Kirstie Alley at a time, Shelley Long, those people like that got on network television and did in some certain limited cable televisions did escalate outside of their out of their TV roles. So granted, it's not as common as it should be, but that was the original design. Is like you get a hot actor for television that drives your show to success, and in return, the actor steps away from television and then can do movies for several $millions a pop, and it's only over a couple of months where they're getting paid normally on television at the sweet spot of their time, like maybe 60,000 an episode. So
not only that, what is Grant's age at this point? Like he's got to be getting up there a little.
He's early to mid 30s.
I was gonna say, so there's that factor. Then there's also just the simple fact of he kind of played hardball with this last season. So again,
I don't blame him. I mean, the writing's been atrocious.
Well, no, but I'm just saying. So like at that point, I just don't see this as a win-win situation for anybody inside Warner Brothers to even want to like consider that idea. But like the chances are so slim. I'm not saying they're out of the realm of possibility, but moving on with this point, Commandant VHS says with $2, why not have a cameo of the next Flash? This is something that, okay, how should I word this? Let's say I brought this up to an individual as a plausibility of how about at the end of the movie, is there a possibility that whoever they choose to be the next actor going forward, they have him become the character at the end because multiverse? And the answer basically I was given was they're looking at all options on the table right now. So that is in the realm of possibility, I would say, but I doubt it. Chances are they'll just do this movie, get it out of the way, and then quietly announce after this film has come out on video and all that business, when they finally decide what they're going to do with the character next or characters, then they'll announce who the next Flash is going to be whenever the next movie he's going to be involved in. It could be a year, 2 years, 3 years.
It's not going to happen until after. Yeah. So we're going to get the next Shazam. We're going to get Batgirl. Then we're going to get the Flash, and then Aquaman, or the Aquaman and the Flash.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of how those end up going is how Zaslav's really going to decide how things go forward.
I just thought of something. Sure. What if they didn't? What if they did not recast Barry Allen because they don't want to seem like, oh, hey, we still got to appeal to the ABC crowd? So instead, they'll just say maybe like his character died or something, and then they just give Wally West like they did in the books. Do you think that's a possibility, or do you really think they're going to commit to sticking with Barry?
They're going to stick with Barry. I know that. I know they're planning on introducing Kid Flash, but these are all up in the air plans because. And they're not bad ideas. That's the other part too. Like you kind of want to expand that because the relationship between the Flash and Kid Flash, when in the early years, is actually kind of fun.
Freaking great! I loved it.
And it also would lead into a really cool Titans franchise as well. But I've gone over some of the history of Zaslav, and even though he is carrying over some films that have already been done before his takeover, he has no personal attachment to things. Like he only is attached to things that make a lot of money, and he has various thresholds, and he designs those thresholds based on the highest successful rates of what's ever at the company at that point, and also what's going on competitively. And unfortunately, with the carrying on of these characters and this style and approach, it doesn't look like the projections are going to be as satisfying to what he needs to do at Warner Brothers. So don't hold your breath. If it does become successful, he will continue with it, but the odds of that are not in good company right now.
No,
Shazam might be a surprise. I'm hoping it's really good. It's got a fantastic cast. The Black Adam film looks interesting as well.
Yeah.
But it's again, Tom, and you've said this more often than not. The Rock is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is as great as an actor as he can be. He's an ensemble guy where his movies do better as an ensemble than as a leading man.
Yeah, he's got this persona of him. But speaking of men with personas, we have Clobbering Times in the house. How you doing?
Hey, yes. Hey there, my friends. Hello. Hear me all right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound great.
But to answer the question, or pretty much I already did, but TK wants to know who this writer of Doctor Strange 2 is. We're going to get into that. It's Michael Waldron.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be the main topic of today here.
Actually,
Yeah, we've been talking about this a hell of a lot longer than I had planned on, and we also got a member chat from Sean Stackhouse, who's been a member for 4 months. It's a minimum. If it, minimum, now I can sound like Porky Pig. A minimum effort puppy level. There you go. So yes, thank you for that, Sean. We appreciate that. Professor Gray says, "Do you think they will just swallow this cost and not release Flash or other Trouble films?" I think there will. Again, like I got the hint at least that they're banking more on the fact that Michael Keaton's in this movie, and that's going to help sell the movie. It doesn't come out for a year. Hopefully, a lot of Ezra's issues will have gone by then, but he just keeps piling more on. And well, now he's got other people coming out with other accusations and such.
Well,
so,
is Batgirl now coming out before the Flash then?
I don't know. I think they pushed that back too.
Yeah, because I haven't heard anything other than the fact
I think that
wrapped.
has to come out after the Flash. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm pretty sure that the team out of Batgirl's upset with that. I mean, yeah, they're being said, yeah, you got a locked release date, but it's going to be later, which means the heat and the excitement and the hype is going to die down a little bit, and that's not always going to be beneficial.
Exactly. So we'll see how this rolls. They may move the movie again yet. That's always a possibility. Then Night of Snoke sent in another $1 and asks, "I've heard Static Shock can't be adapted live because of rights. That's why we got the Black Lightning show instead. And I don't know the holdup on live action Plastic Man, even Submariner. Well, Plastic Man, there was
been in the works for 40 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say even Robert Shea was attached to it at some point. I don't know if he still is. But yeah, and I think they were even trying to get Jim Carrey and some other people at one point.
They were looking at Jim Carrey, Nick Cage, and a couple of other stand-up comics.
Oh my God, Nick Cage.
Nick Cage would be perfect for Plastic Man.
I actually
looks like Plastic Man.
I'm more of a plastic protector.
He's got that zaning weirdness and the movable body that of Plastic Man. So yeah, I could see where you.
I don't know, Cage. I mean, as much as I can't stand Carey as a person, he was born to play Plastic Man. Yellow Brian.
See, and I think that was more of the Robert Shea one. And when we talked to him, he was still attached to that. But that was so long ago that I think I could say something about it now that it obviously has not come to fruition since. But
well, see, again, it goes back to what I said earlier about the umbrella of rights. So some producers have the rights for the characters, and here's the other part too. Ego in Hollywood is a very strange creature. It doesn't follow the same path lines as how it would for normal people. If, say, someone at Warner Brothers wants to make a Plastic Man movie and they find out that Bob Shea has the rights for the films of that through a Warner Brother contract, and that person doesn't like Bob Shea, it's not going to be made. And that's just about it.
Yeah. Well, on the other side of it too.
Yeah, that could be for like Static Shock and even Submariner is Marvel, but that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like for Static Shock, that's Wade McDuffie, and I think I think he was able to. I don't think he sold the rights. Like he sold the comic rights of Milestone to DC, but I don't know if the film rights were part of that deal. That might still be retained with his family. So yeah, that's something to look into.
Submariner, as far as I know, the rights are back now at Marvel. They were over at Sony or
Universal.
Fox? Remember Universal? Well, I knew it was one of them. Yeah, one of the many.
One of them, yeah.
It was at Universal because they couldn't use Submariner for Fantastic Four 2. They had to do Silver Surfer.
Static Shock. Now, isn't that one where it's not just could be plausibly a producerial situation, but isn't that a newer character to where the creator might have some certain rights
That's
to that?
Dwayne
too?
McDuffie. He passed away. His family, I think, has the rights to it. It was under Milestone Comics, and Milestone was acquired by Detective Comics shortly before he passed away.
Yeah.
Well, how long ago was that then?
Almost 10 years.
2011 or something?
Okay, wow. I'm fucking old. Jesus.
Well, Dwayne McDuffie passed away rather young for anyone.
He did.
It was tragic.
I know,
he was
but
really good.
To me, somebody said something about 2009 the other day, and I'm just like, that wasn't that. Oh, I guess it was almost fucking.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
12, 15 fucking years ago now. Jesus. Then Rave Girl's in the house. And she says, Warner Brothers better pray Ezra don't get into any more trouble. Basically, that's what they're doing. Especially if someone gets hurt. That blowback will be intense. That's just it. Once you hit a point, like, that's the thing is we're kind of at, where's the threshold? Like, where's the point where they finally go enough is enough? I don't think they've reached it yet, but it's getting there.
it's crazy because they push back the Flash a year, but I'm looking at it as like, well, that's just another year for Ezra to do something stupid that really gonna hurt the movie.
They're just giving all they're doing is just giving him more room to do more damage and to hurt the brand of the movie even more. And I feel like he's actually done significant amount of damage. I don't feel like this can just go away. People are gonna forget as easily. Like, it'd be one thing if it was when he left it at the choking the girl, which obviously he should have never done, but the amount of its incidents and the fact they're all escalating, I feel like that is going to stick with him far more than his first incident. Even though the first incident should have been the bells ringing, but now he's just signing himself a death knell.
Well, I think it was originally pushed back more so because the movie needed some retooling. So like that was one issue because I think they did do some reshoots, if I remember right.
They need to wrap him up in a straitjacket, send him to rehab for 6 months.
He would have been a great Joker, actually.
Send him on an apology tour, and then have him donate a bunch of money to a charity, have him save some kittens from trees, and then they'll be good to go with the movie.
In the Flash costume, no less.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we got a member chat from Kitty Bear, PCI member for 11 months at the minimum effort puppy level, almost a year. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. And then we had Zontar, who sent in a Canadian $5. Says, do you think the newly announced live-action Sega movies with Paramount will be set in the Sonic universe or each IP kept in its own? Oh, this is news to me. If somebody wants to grab the story, I did not know this. Andre would probably be interested in this, too.
I know Paramount was really pleased with Sonic 2.
Yeah.
They do have a good deal with Sega.
Yeah.
All I can say is the regime that's in charge now is not the regime that was in charge when they had the same deal with Marvel. So, in fact, they have to hold on to Sega, because I'm telling you right now, I would not be surprised if next year Disney makes an offer to buy the contract of Sega from Paramount, and Paramount just says, "Sure, go ahead," and repeats the mistake again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe we'll grab that story for after the other one. But let's get into this Doctor Strange news. I don't know what the other properties are, so I don't want until we read the story. I don't want to comment on it, but we'll look into that one. Let's see here. Bring this up. We've got this that just come out. And this one I think Script's going to have some fun with. Doctor Strange 2 screenwriter defends Wanda's evolution, talks cameos, and his Star Wars script. From the very lovely Adam B.
He goes back to
Very.
being a villain.
Dude, she literally gained no character progression. And the little bit that she started from Avengers Age of Ultron, when Hawkeye said, the minute you walk out of here, you're an Avenger. That was supposed to be her villain to hero. All they did was they brought her back where she started. Yeah. So basically a 360. And and they are okay with, like, how twisted does your mind have to be to think that this is okay? Like, and people are actually like okay with it too. Like, I've had to explain to people, like, in context by making, I guess you could say, like, an emotional argument, like, hey, what if some lady who looked like your mom try to take you away from your actual mom? Would you feel good about it? And then like, oh, I see now. And
actually, I would actually be happy with that. My mom was a horrible person.
Well,
so
I'm sorry, Script. I'm sure you get what I'm saying. I'm sure you get what I'm saying. Point rings true, but I am sorry, but you're still a wonderful man. I love hearing you speak, but point still stands though. Like, it's amazing how people can like even defend it. And once you have to make an emotional argument where it's, used against them, then they start to see, like, you should just see it as the principle of this is just messed up.
Were you going to say something, Clobby?
I was going to say that her whole history in comics was she started out as a villain early on, just like in her first film. Then she, of course, became a hero, part of the Avengers, but for a long time. And then, of course, that Darker Than Scarlet stuff started in the mid-'80s. And after that, she's been up and down. She's been good and bad and good and bad. And so this is just the films doing what they always do, mining bits and pieces from comics and not doing it anywhere close to as well. Even though I was never fond of that whole Darker Than Scarlet stuff anyway with her. I don't like it. It really got annoying. It was annoying to me. I don't know. I don't think it's a good decision to use it in the movies either. That's just what they're doing. They're stealing stuff. It's like he talks like he came up with the idea.
Wanda, who is your daddy and what does he do?
So
Yeah.
Michael Waldron, for those that don't know, he was a writing assistant for a long time under Dan Harmon, who
I
did
think it says it
Community
here.
and Rick and Morty. He got one
Yeah.
episode on Rick and Morty, and he did this terrible script called the most horrible person in the world, and it's a time traveling, quote unquote, comedy. It's very Rick and Morty esque. And because of that script that circulated around, Kevin Feige picked him to work on Loki, because of the time authority and all that other stuff, time variance authority and etc. And I guess Feige was very pleased with the scripts that were turned in before production began and gave him Doctor Strange 2. And I'm just baffled by it because I've read his script. In fact, Robert My Burnett has also read the script. I think Bob likes it more than I do. But I looked at this and I'm thinking this is a lot of derivative, basic comedy stuff. It's low-hanging fruit. It doesn't have the insightfulness or the fun commentary that some of the best episodes of Community that Dan Harmon wrote has. Like, it's someone else trying to ape another person's style, so it's like a copy of a copy.
Just another hack, in other words, like everybody else over there right now.
Yeah, well, let's get into this article here. The script actually saved me from reading like most of the first thing here. As alum, all that business, I don't even have to really read that. Together, Raimi and Waldron have made one of the most distinctive and, for some, controversial movies ever in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this is basically Variety admitting that Doctor Strange has not been exactly received exclusively well among the masses, let's say. That's probably the best way to put it. Yeah. Movies ever in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to wit, the big spoilers start here. So, yeah, kids, if you don't want spoilers, check out for a few minutes. Wanda Maximoff goes full Scarlet Witch and brutally murders anyone who gets in her way in her mission to find a universe in which her sons from the 2021 Disney Plus series WandaVision are still alive. It's a heel turn that has shocked many, including Olsen, especially when Wanda decimates the Illuminati, the team of superheroes from an alternate reality that includes Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier from 20th Century Fox's X-Men movies, even though I think they were trying to emulate more so the animated version. Anyway, Anson Mount's Black Bolt from the ABC's Inhumans TV series, and John Krasinski's Reed Richards for the first time. They need to really get it.
Yeah,
better.
I mean, first of all, he's Jim Richards. He's not Reed.
The first time the leader of the Fantastic Four has appeared in the MCU. Okay. In an interview with The Variety, Waldron says he understands why some fans have been thrown by Wanda's violent plummet into the dark side, but he stands by it, pointing to the Darkhold. I knew they were going to use that as an excuse. The Book of Evil Magic Wanda received from Agatha Harkness in WandaVision, and Wanda's unresolved.
Didn't she steal that from Agatha?
I have no idea. As I didn't watch it all. As the catalyst for the behavior,
I can't even remember.
Did. I was gonna say I think she
remember
did.
I watched it
because I remember it was like the 7th or 8th episode. That's when it happened. Yeah, it was around that point because I remember like I was really enjoying how the show started, and that last episode pissed me off. But carry on, Tom. We'll have our discourse about this whole spiel.
Yeah, because we got Waldron here who looks like
he has a Captain Hook mustache. That's not
not just that. He looks like Henry Cavill's lesser brother.
All right,
he looks like Doctor Strange in the comics.
Was Waldron seen for talent, or was he really just cheap and easy as far as the pay grade goes?
Cheap and
no,
easy.
I think it's a little bit of cheap and easy, but again, this is like the producer's predatory act, and not like in the weird relationship type of thing. This is the part where producers like, man, you know what the hardest part of my job is? Wrangling writers and directors that have an established career and can get away with a lot more stuff. Well, Kevin Feige has circumvented that by basically finding up-and-comers who are so desperate for the work that they'll just say, yes, sir. Or do you want me to jump? How high? Do you want me to run? How far? Like those people, because they're so desperate to get that footholding, because credits are a very good currency in Hollywood. The more credits you have with the higher tentpole properties, the more freedom you're able to earn. But Kevin Feige has got a stranglehold on that because he's hiring a lot of these very fresh young people claiming that they're talented. And they do have a spark of talent, but they haven't refined it and turned it into a burning fire.
Well, a great example is how they used Rick and Morty. And as you said, he only wrote one fucking episode.
Yeah, but he has that reputation of being a writer's assistant for Dan Harmon for many years. And that usually retires. Dan Harmon says, I've got all these ideas. I'm gonna tell you what they are. You write them down. You're going to hone it into some sort of story. I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to do my revisions, and then I'm going to submit it, which means that he can always argue, well, a lot of the great episodes of Rick and Morty or Community, I helped write because
That was all me.
And
Yeah,
he basically says, I've got through my experience working with him, I know how to make good content, which may or may not. Sometimes it can be true with the writer's assistants, 100%, because they do elevate themselves and get their own shows or films or whatnot. And sometimes they're just really good at dictation and they got a couple of good creative takes on an idea. But I mean, creativity is not easy. That's why we value it.
Yeah.
This guy looks like he's got a future Alex Klutzman written all over him.
In an interview with Variety, Waldron says he understands. We heard all that. And Wanda's unresolved grief. He talks about how Marvel Studios Chief Kevin Feige helped to drive casting the Illuminati, why Namor, aka Submariner, wasn't among them, and how the Star Wars movie he's writing for Kevin Feige has light years of difference from the Multiverse of Madness.
Well, it takes place on Tatooine, that's why.
So this is a fucking interview here. When did you know that Wanda was going to be the villain in the movie? Sam, I came on in February of 2020, and initially we were inheriting what the prior administration had been doing. And then COVID happened and our start date pushed 6 months. So he and I had the opportunity to essentially start over and say, what do we want this movie to be? And the foundational building block of starting over as Wanda should be the villain the whole way through. This should be a story of Doctor Strange protecting America Chavez from Wanda. So it was there from the very beginning, really, in what is the ultimate version. So right there, they're basically admitting, because at this point, WandaVision would have already been shot, right?
In 2020?
Yeah, because it came out in 2021.
It was supposed to come out originally, the fall of 2020. Then they moved it to like January 2021. So it was like 2 or 3 months they did.
Yeah,
push it.
so
I think
you're
they
probably just finishing
shooting
up
it during the pandemic start. Yeah.
So this here goes more into what the Russos were saying about them not having a plan, especially for this phase, I think is what they meant. But yeah, because right here, they did all this shit in WandaVision without considering the ending of it being here, right? Mm-hmm. So like this is all an afterthought. It sounds like there was a version where Wanda wasn't the initial villain. Well, there was the version where she was more of, and I even did an earlier draft where she was more of a member of the ensemble and turned bad by the end. And it always felt to me like it was just hedging. There was never a way to service her fall from grace properly as a supporting character in the movie, because there had to be a separate antagonist. And it also felt, I'm going to make this bigger. Sorry. There we go. And it also felt like we were having the biggest bit of fun on the table for somebody else. And truth be told, having watched and experienced and studied WandaVision, I felt like she was at the point in possession of Darkhold where she was ready to break bad. She had reached the point that she reaches in comics, and we could see WandaVision was already done before he wrote this shit.
No.
Well, so, yeah, he was announced after WandaVision had completed airing. So
they could have easily solved this issue with Wanda's character by having either Mephisto or, in my opinion, preferably Nightmare, but I'll take Mephisto, saying, you know what, she's the one, these characters are literally making her do it. Like, okay, yeah, that's bad, but it would be textbook literally out of her control. But no, we have to make her do it, and somehow we gotta make her this tragic character. You didn't make her tragic. You made her a fucked up human being who wants to take children away who don't even exist from another mob. What the hell is wrong with these people?
Speaking of fucked up shit, Adam Wolford says in Ultimate version, Wanda and Pietro were lovers. What the fuck?
Gross.
That's some Game of Thrones shit.
It's like the Ultimates line.
Yeah, there's a reason that line
with the Ultimates line on the X-Men side of things.
That doesn't exist.
So anyhow, how tricky was it to connect what happened in WandaVision to that Breaking Bad point in Multiverse of Madness? I'm sure you've seen how some fans are having a hard time believing she'd go evil so quickly. Did you ever? Well, she was kind of all evil during WandaVision. Do you ever wish would you ever wish a bit that WandaVision had ended, underlining more clearly that Wanda was heading to a dark place. No, I don't wish WandaVision had done anything differently. I wouldn't change a thing about what they did. My interpretation of WandaVision is that she confronts her grief and she lets go of people she has under her control. But I don't think she necessarily resolves her grief in that show. And I think she resolves her anger. Maybe she's able to say goodbye to Vision, but I think she's really just fallen in love with those kids that she just fucking met for a week. I think
They
that
don't even exist. And where the fuck is Vision and all this shit? Like, he literally could be he's like a yin to her yang. And be like, hey, Wanda, like, let's settle the no, let's calm down. Let's talk about it. Vision would have been the perfect yin to this. And nope, Vision's he's going out somewhere being white and just flying into the sunset for no reason. Like, he literally he got away, and that was it. And oh my god. The stupidity of the writing of
Script
this movie.
never holds back when he tells me what he thinks of my ideas. So tell me how you would speak to Mr. Waldron if you were in the same fucking room, if he just told you all this shit.
Have you ever read a story before?
But she fell in love with these kids, sir.
Well, I mean, she fell in love with the fantasy. The fact of the matter is that what's stopping her, based on what was established in WandaVision, what's stopping her from going into that cabin and repeating exactly what she did in Westview, but on a smaller scale in that cabin?
But she wants her kids, sir.
Yeah, she can have them. She just has to repeat what she did in Westview in a smaller area of that cabin. What's preventing that?
But I want to make this movie, sir. So is
I mean, that's the thing. Like, she can remake them again. What would be better is like that initial idea they said, where there's another character, say Nightmare Mephisto, who basically says, "Oh, you thought you made them up, but while I was watching you take over Westview, I actually made them for you, and they exist, and I have them now. And if you want to see them again, you have to do my bidding."
Right, and that leads into the whole yeah.
And then the other part too is like, what you do is you just have her start liking the evil acts that she does as she's getting corrupted, and now she ends up becoming evil herself, and do what's really fun with evil characters, and it's also apes a little bit with some of the comics, is that you have Wanda find a way to circumvent and betray either Nightmare or Mephisto, get her kids, and then just torment the heck out of them, and now she's this very powerful, evilly corrupted thing, and her children have to, maybe they could be afraid of that, maybe they could really like that too, because it's cool and awesome, and kids are silly at that age. And we can see that her desperation to get their kids back has actually not just caused her to be corrupted, but now she's corrupting the purity of her children that she cared so much about to protect and have in the first place. And now you just made her a far more evil villain as a result of that. But I think that's a more clearer goal to give for the arc is of her character, if she wants to be corrupted and taken over by the manipulation and desperation, and also, let's say, the hubris of trying to solve it on her own, as opposed to getting help from the people that got her to this level in the first place, like the surviving member of the Avengers.
Well, it looks like we may have an answer on Mephisto coming up here, because basically, this next question is, so is Wanda dead? And he says it's up for interpretation, aka depends on how much they want to pay her in the future. And then the next question is, Mephisto has been a headcanon MCU villain for over a year now. Was he ever in play for this movie in any way? No, only in jokes, only in bits I did in the writer's room and in text message I sent to WandaVision head writer Jack Schaefer. Mephisto was never in play for us. So there's your answer on that one.
Well, what would stop Wanda from, once she gained control of the two kids from, what was it, Universe 838, why wouldn't she want to go to the next universe over and take care of those kids, and then the next universe over and take care of those kids? Why? What was so special about the 838 kids?
Okay, well, that's where I think Andre nailed it with his video, and I think that's the point, is that those were the ideal ones she wanted. She fell in love with, like Script said at the beginning there, the fantasy, right?
Right.
And that's where, Andre, I felt broke it down real well in his video, because he was basically saying that that's where her logic breaks down. And even Wong points it out to her early on, like, what the fuck do you think is going to happen when you try to replace the other you? right? And what makes you think that these kids are going to respond to you the way that they responded to her? And she has that happen to her, right? Which kind of plays out almost as well as the Martha scene in BBS, if you ask me. But and because it's like, seriously, it's like, really, you're like, this shit is just fucking dawning on you, right? Like, there was a better way to have this happen and you didn't do it. And you get to a point where you had to have had her say, and you have to have her commit to the idea of, it doesn't fucking matter. I want this for me. I don't give a fuck about anybody else, even another version of me, right? Like, that's where but you have to give her some kind of stasis for this. Like, at least tell us, like, okay, all you needed to do is have a scene where, like, you bring up the whole Westfield thing, and she's like, yeah, it may have only been a couple weeks or whatever it was in the actual show, but be like, to her, see, like, it actually felt like a lifetime. But that's a lie, because we watched those kids grow up in front of our faces in real time, and they actually acknowledge, or in like flash forward time,
they can force themselves to grow up,
and they acknowledge that in the show. Yeah.
And she begged them not to do that again when the dog died, like, because they could do it. So, there's again, it's all about the fantasy. Now, here's the other part too. Is like, say in all of those other universes, the kids are real, and that Wanda has been with them for like a decade. You then have to reconcile the fact that the Wanda that had the fantasy doesn't know all those years in comparison, so she could never convincingly step into that role. Like, there's just a lot of it's basically a cool idea that hasn't been explored enough to be.
I think you broke it back. I think you really did. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, because this is kind of my somewhat interpretation, or what I would have done with what you just told me, script, what we had, and where I would go with it. And I'm going to try and keep it as quickly as possible. I think you're right. You need a Mephisto-like character to basically blackmail Wanda into this idea that he could give her the children she wants. But in return, he wants, let's say, America Chavez, because he secretly just wants her power. He's not really as powerful as he's acting to be to Wanda, right? Like, that's kind of the whole lie he's selling, because he can't really make her kids. He's just going to sell her the fantasy of these kids. And so in the process of Wanda trying to get America Chavez for him, right? Like, that's where this all kind of comes together. And then she realizes that she's being tricked at the end, whatever, however you want to play that out. But like, that's the whole idea she has to come to terms with, is that these kids are not fucking real. She did not make them. They don't exist. No matter where she goes, it's not going to make a difference, right? They don't exist in her world, and she can't have that. She can want the idea of it, but you have to set her up with some kind of reason for having that twist. You can't just have it be, because the dark hold told her.
She dream walked into another body and saw, there's other universes.
Yeah. Like, that just doesn't make no sense. Like, like you said before, it's like a Faustian deal, right? It's like, I can give you the children you desire, but you have to get me what I want, and that is this child, right?
And here's the other part too. Like, let's say he claims, like, listen, this kid has the power to go to other universes, and they're the only ones that can wield it. But I can wield it if I can steal that power. I'm the only one powerful enough to control it. You get me her, I can use that power to get you your kids. There you go, right? And that's your bargaining chip.
You can even have a twist there where she decides to turn on Mephisto and try to do it herself by trying to force the kid to do it for her. And then that's where the kid says, I don't know how to do it. It's setting up that whole thing like that was in the movie already. Like, there's elements.
It's a great Wanda film. It has nothing to do with Doctor Strange, right? Like, that's what we're talking about.
That's what we keep having, that problem we keep going back to. Exactly. And where does that lie into? And that is the problem that WandaVision fucked up the landing. They messed up the end of the show. That led to this, and this was the problem that a lot of people were talking about. Even those who liked the show had to usually, and I think didn't you say you liked WandaVision?
I loved WandaVision.
Yeah. Did you like the ending though? Did you accept that? Okay,
No.
See, that's what I'm saying. Even people who liked the show have come to me and said, I love the show, but yeah, that ending just didn't make no sense to me. And they've come to this conclusion themselves that, Wanda was kind of a villain that whole fucking time. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what Waldron got out of this. So yeah, he got that first step, but he's missing what script is bringing into this, I think. And I'm sure, Klobby would say, well, they did this and that and the other in the comics, or Nick would too, that would actually add to this. And that's what it feels like they're doing. It's like they're deliberately avoiding the comics, which is another point that Andre brought up in his.
They're not just avoiding them. I mean, as you mentioned yesterday on Midnight's Edge in the Morning, they're skipping through literal decades of history and maybe selecting itty bitty micro bits
they
during that
cherry
time.
pick.
Yeah, cherry pick. But they were speed rushing to get to all the characters that have been done in the last 8-9 years. And obviously, like in WandaVision, a lot of that they took from the Vision miniseries that came out in 2015, and there's a little bit of aspects of Avengers disassembled in there. I think that was, somewhere between 06 and 09, right around that time frame. But this story, I don't like. I know my girlfriend, she even liked the show, but she was like, "What the hell's with that ending? Like it, none of it made it doesn't feel like an ending." One thing, but also you see hold up, Wanda's doing this. Like everyone's speculating who's doing this to her, who's doing this to her, and then also let's not forget all the momentum they had going. Remember how everyone was talking about Quicksilver or not Quicksilver at the end of episode 5? That was everywhere talk about people who like.
Well, that's where the show killed it for me,
and that killed it because he ended up. It was even worse than what they did with the Mandarin. Like they made that pale in comparison. Like it's just like with a Ralph Boner. Like think about it. Like you now said that the ending of that show now has no point now, and think about it. And like if you look at that scene now in retrospect, it's like, oh, there's like at the time when we're like, whoa, hey, they're gonna collide with the X-Men. No, they're not. No.
Well, it kind of has a point, but again, it's just in my opinion, sloppily handled there, and the ball is kind of picked up. They fumbled the ball at the end of WandaVision. Waldron and Raimi picked it up here. I don't know if they didn't get a touchdown, I would say, maybe in Disney's eyes, box office wise, but story wise, they may have got the ball back, but they still didn't. They
got
score
a couple of yards and then fumbled.
They missed the field goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other part too is that, I mean, on the premise side of things, the reveal that Wanda is doing this in Westview is actually a really good dramatic twist idea. The problem is you have to convey to the audience the justification for why she thought this was a good idea, which I think really failed in the WandaVision series. We didn't buy her reasoning for it. It just did not happen. We didn't see the fall. We didn't get any information to really play through, because I think if this was going to be, say, a 6-part hour-long show of WandaVision, which I think it should have been in the first place, I would have had at that third episode the reveal that she's doing this, and then the next 2 episodes following up as to how she got to that point, so that we see that fall from grace, and then the final episode is the desperation of trying to, one, save the people of Westview, and then also save Wanda's soul from doing that. And unfortunately, that was not the case in that matter. Like, you don't even have to achieve saving the soul. You just have to save Westview and sort of put in some form of punishment for her to face, or at least try to avoid. That's the other part too. Like, there's no punishment for her to avoid, because instead of going after Wanda for what she did, they're arresting the guy that took 2 shots at fictional children.
Yeah. Well, and this movie should have just been called, first of all, if they'd have called it The Scarlet Witch, maybe I wouldn't. I think it would have been better received. And again, like going off of the comment I just had up on screen, I stand by this. This should have just been a Disney Plus Avengers style special where it kind of concluded all the shows, because it would have made sense to bring in Hawkeye. It would have made sense to bring in some of the other characters. You don't necessarily have to bring in Loki, but I mean, at least with like Hawkeye and stuff like that. He's an Avenger. He's some of the oldest friends she has. You would think that Steven being
Sam could come back. He joined the Avengers.
Yeah, Sam would too. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that way you could have kind of conglomerated them all at the same time. But Steven would have been like, okay, I need to get some people together. He would have grabbed whoever was left, being Sam and Hawkeye of the classic Avengers, to try and talk Wanda down. Not fucking strangers. Right. Like, what the fuck is that about? She's already feeling alone. She's already feeling isolated. I think Doctor Strange is probably clever enough to think of something like that.
He is clever, and that's the thing. They dumbed down his smartness, because we saw how amazing, when given good stuff to work with, like a la Infinity War, we saw how badass Doctor Strange was when he was going against Thanos. He was the first one really giving him a good fight. And this movie, his own movie with a very distracting hairline, that I'm Lego hair, yeah. The Lego hair, yeah. I'm just like,
Well,
what, did Strange
well,
just become dumb all of a
I
sudden?
don't know. In
Like,
fairness, he was pretty dumb in Spider-Man: No Way Home when he did what he
He
did.
was. He
The whole
was.
movie, look, I know everyone loves that
Kinda,
movie.
yeah.
I like that movie, but my biggest problem with it that makes me crazy every time, I've only seen it once, but you know what I mean, is
Yeah.
that it's all predicated on Doctor Strange being irresponsible and stupid. So,
Which is breaking character.
which was terrible. I like the film, but that the whole movie is damaged by that idiocy at the beginning when he's just reckless and idiotic.
Which is
Tina-
crazy because our first introduction of him is him doing his due diligence with regards to a patient and realizing
Right.
that another surgeon is going to screw up because they're not
Right.
paying attention.
Well,
It's like,
can,
oh,
can I
just
at least
established-
pause it or at least set up this? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. My bad. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he just established the ingrained behavior with Doctor Strange is that he actually takes time to figure things out first before he acts. In fact, the entire way he beats Mordo is by figuring out what's going. It's like, I don't know how to beat him, but I'll do a time loop so I can start figuring out what's going on. And you realize, oh wait, the time loop I'm doing is actually driving him nuts, so I can maintain this.
Funny
and
you mentioned
strike a
Mordo.
bargain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mordo they literally
Sorry,
had a
Dormammu. Sorry.
Dormammu,
yeah,
right?
But it's good that you mentioned that script because Baron Mordo had a scene that seemed pretty important in the post credits in the first Doctor Strange, and all we got was another version of it from another dimension in the second movie. So it's almost like that scene is no longer relevant, like from the post credits. Like this movie was not a sequel to Doctor Strange. It was a Marvel movie, Marvel TV show sequel, and I understand if you want to like have some dots to connect, say, hey, listen, like. You don't have to watch these other shows, the other movies, but if you do, obviously you benefit from the bigger picture. But it doesn't feel like a Doctor Strange sequel. It felt like a Marvel movie sequel. And you want to know how I know it is? Because at my employer, a lot of people were not calling it the Doctor Strange sequel. They were calling it the Marvel movie. At least when Spider-Man came out in December, a lot of people were saying the new Spider-Man. And that's a very big problem when you don't even know who's the headline character. You just know as
going
the
off
Marvel
of what you're
film.
saying, Nick, and that goes into what Tina's saying here too. And I get what you're saying. They've never named a movie after a villain before, but in this case, I would have been okay with it, and it makes sense.
I would have
Captain Marvel.
I would have too.
Even though, look,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think sometimes it's a little bit exaggerated to say it's not a Doctor Strange movie. He still is in it a lot, and it's the most entertaining.
But you could have
bits of
still
the film
done it as a Scarlet Witch and from her perspective,
I
and
would-
had him be a part of it, though.
No, I'm fine with that. In fact, I'm absolutely. I mean, as coming from someone who didn't hate the movie as much as most people, and actually found a lot of enjoyment stuff in it, enjoyment out of it, especially with all of the Sam Raimi stuff. I'm one that I'm still entirely against using Wanda at all for a Doctor Strange film. Actually, we all know it's a Wanda film, but I still think he's in it a lot.
He is.
And it does concentrate on him a lot, and some of that stuff I like. It's just that I would not use her for a big bad for a Doctor Strange film at all. And to me, that's where it goes off the rails. The fact that you're putting her in this film and concentrating on, giving her that big of a part in it is my biggest problem. But I still think it does concern itself with Doctor Strange more than, I don't know.
Well, and that's where my issues with the movie lie, right? It starts out as Doctor Strange 2.
Yes.
And then about not even a third of the way into the movie, more like 15, 20 minutes into the movie, it automatically switches gears and it's a Scarlet Witch movie. And that goes to my point this should have just been a Scarlet Witch movie that should have been, and it could have, like I said, gotten more Avengers involved, not been Doctor Strange been so much the focal point of the heroic role, but he would have obviously got involved considering she's a witch and she's doing shit like this. Who the fuck else is going to get involved? The Sorcerer Supreme and all the sorcerers are going to get involved.
Oh God, Tom.
Of course. So
anyway,
go ahead.
God. You just opened up a can of worms with the Sorcerer Supreme. So let's go back to No Way Home. I know some people had that complaint, and I can see why, but I was okay when they said Wong was the Sorcerer Supreme No Way Home because he was thought to be dead. He went on vacation. They thought he was dead. So I could look past that. I was like, that didn't bug me. I was like, okay, maybe he should put in some time, do some work to reclaim the title. Who was doing all the heavy lifting in this movie, and who was doing nowhere as much as him? We all know Wong wasn't doing even a quarter of what Strange was doing, and yet he still keeps the title by the end of the movie. Are you freaking kidding me?
Right.
He had more than earned that title compared to him.
Agreed.
Like what the fuck was that shit? Where did they people come with these decisions? Like, if you're gonna be Sorcerer Supreme, own that shit. No, he just gets to have the privilege of the title, but does none of the heavy lifting for it. Bullshit. It's Dr. Stephen Strange, not Wong. End of story.
Well, and he's going to get usurped in the next movie too, I think, too, and we already know that from
yeah.
But let's get into the Illuminati shit here.
Oh boy.
How does bringing the Illuminati into the into this movie work? Do you go to Kevin Feige and say, I want to bring Patrick Stewart and Anson Mount back? Can we do that? That's kind of a combination of us putting forth. Well, what if we do this? But also Kevin's as excited about this stuff as we are. So sometimes those ideas are coming from Kevin saying, and this is what I believe. Well, what if we got so-and-so and I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the call. So he's excited about all that stuff as any of us. It's a big geeky team effort to see what we can assemble for that team. Now, this to me, correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys are interpreting it any other way, is him basically saying, no, we don't really get to pick that shit. Kevin tells us who's going to be there.
That's how it is. I've learned that since before Civil War.
It's all Kevin.
I think Kevin. It sounds like he cast a big net and decided to see who would say, yeah, I'll do it.
And it's possible that could, 6 may be right. There may be some truth to that. But the whole, it's a big geeky team effort. No, it's not a big geeky team effort. They went on the Google biographies of these characters and said, okay, these are the characters. They don't read the actual books to understand these characters. It's like when people try to defend these Marvel characters, like, oh yeah, I'm now a fan, and they just read the Google biography. No, you did not. And that's what these guys are doing.
Because there's a website that has detailed the majority of Marvel and DC of characters and their appearances. They've got a release date order and where in the books they are. So you can go to that page, see a whole slew of like the introduction to those characters, what issues they were first introduced to, the pivotal stories, and it gives you the issue number and when it was published. So you can actually go to like an archive, like again, Marvel, Disney has a digital archive, Warner Brothers has a digital archive of all their comic books. I have copies of some of them because I had some intern jobs there, and you can go and read the stuff right there. And to read a 22-page comic book does not take a whole lot out of your day. You can go through a good 5-6 part story arc in like a quarter of the afternoon. Right. And get enough bearings and take enough notes that you're like, okay, this is something to start from right now. And then, the next day you follow up with the next story arc, and then the next and the next. And in about 2 weeks' time, you can read like up to 200 issues.
I don't think it's so much a wide net spread thing. Is in this case, I think these were pretty calculated cameos.
Well, I can share the story about like the pre-production of Civil War. Because I had some people that were on that. Because they basically said, who can we use, who can we can't? And Feige's like, pitch me some characters and we'll see what we can do. But I want this set of group. And then they write the script. And once they get to their third draft, Feige comes in. He doesn't say anything. He just does the Spider-Man like web throwing thing with his hand. And then he's like, see if you can make it happen, and walks away. And then they're like, oh crap, we got to write Spider-Man into this.
I was going to say, because that happened midway through the production or writing process or whatever it was.
Happened midway through writing, yeah. They pitched a bunch of ideas, and Feige...
And I'm pretty sure that they told him Black Panther had to be in the movie. That's
yes, they already had Black Panther in pre-production at that point.
So, yeah, there may be a little leeway in this, but I'm thinking, because the thing is, and the reason I'm saying this is because the Illuminati seems like it was picked purposefully. Like, it seems like they knew this was probably going to be the last chance for Patrick Stewart to play this character.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling if they're going to bring back any more characters, they're probably going to be more of the first class cast going forward. Because we've heard they've been in plenty of talks with them, and plus they've already been established in the Deadpool universe. Anson Mount, we know that I have a feeling that was a Kevin Feige one, because we know that he was a fan of the Inhumans and that didn't turn out the way he wanted. And he had even said in some interviews something about Anson Mount's character coming back and how he wanted to do Black Bolt differently and all this kind of shit, and to ignore the series. And this was his Black Bolt and all that kind of crap.
I don't know.
Aside from the costume, that was a horrible.
Yeah, I mean, the costume wasn't great, but and any actor yourself would love to play. Every
Right.
actor worth their salt would love to play Black Bolt because you have no lines to memorize.
Yeah, well, but these idiots don't understand how Black Bolt. I hate that's my most hated scene in the film. They don't understand how his powers work. I thought the costume looked pretty good. He's good.
Yeah, I was
They
happy
don't
with it, too.
understand Black Bolt's powers. That seems
But
terrible.
yeah, and then the rest of them, clearly we know why Krasinski was there. They've been setting it up. They've been teasing and talking the Fantastic Four for a while.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I am not so sure we're going to see him again.
agreed.
No, we won't.
I think
No,
this was
you're
a
right,
fan
Tom.
gimme. I think this is the only time we're ever going to
Head
see him
fake.
play this role. Yes, exactly. It was like, this is your
He was
one.
placating, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and then
here's the
after
thing.
this, yeah.
Fan casting is not really successful. I mean, I know a lot of people that were fan casting Christian Bale for Batman, but out of all the other Batman performances, his Bruce Wayne was pretty good, but his Batman was to be desired.
Well,
'Cause,
one
I mean,
of the
he
few
came
times
up
it
with
ever
a weird
worked
dwarf, and
was
it-
Patrick Stewart. That was one of the few times.
I
it
don't know.
ever
I
worked.
I always wanted Cumberbatch to be Doctor Strange. Then I was surprised when they actually cast him because I thought it was going to be
You're
someone
probably
else.
in the rarity because a lot of people weren't even aware of Cumberbatch at that point.
Well, yeah,
he was
I
doing
just somehow
Sherlock.
thought he
Was
would
a
be.
blowout
Yeah.
role, really, for him.
It was because of Sherlock. I thought,
Yeah.
wow, he would be good. Then they keep talking about Joaquin Phoenix and people like that at that point, and I was like, no.
I remember Joaquin Phoenix.
Well,
I'm like, no.
on the point of Professor X, they ask him, did he come from the Fox movies or the 90s series? And he says a little bit of both. I don't know if I'm technically supposed to get into specifics about these actors or characters, but I worked with the performer to even talk about making it different, so it was a different version of him. He used a line from Days of Future Past that he says to Steven, but also we drew from the classic cartoon version, which I was pointing out earlier. He's a variant who has qualities of a bunch of different versions of those guys across the multiverse. And again, I think the only reason he was there this time is the next time we see him, he's going to either be played by McAvoy again or somebody completely new. Was Namor ever a possibility? We talked about him because he's certainly an original member of the Illuminati, but I think Marvel has other plans for him in the MCU, and so he didn't make his way to this particular movie. In other words, Kevin said no. Try and blow through this a little bit quicker here. I'm sure you're aware that fans have been clamoring for John Krasinski to play the Reed Richards. How involved were you in casting him in the part? And here we get an answer here for this, at least or his prepared answer. I'm not involved in the casting. See? But as with all of these performers, I worked really, really close with him in bringing that character to life with him and Sam.
Sorry, that
Yeah.
explains why the character didn't come to life on screen.
And especially on that one, because that was the one character that had no real precedent ever in the MCU, at least figuring out how we want this guy to be. That was a lot of fun. That particular character is certainly one of my favorite comic book characters. Do you expect Krasinski will return for the Fantastic Four movie? It's a question for somebody else.
No kidding.
Well, I'll ask this. Was Wanda always supposed to kill all of the Illuminati? Yeah. That was there in my first draft of the script. That was the madness of the multiverse to me, really. You introduce a superhero team that makes the audience feel like they're finally safe, and then the Scarlet Witch eviscerates them. It was a great way to knock the audience off their feet, and then hopefully you spend the rest of the movie terrified of Wanda and what she's capable of.
It did the opposite for me. It
yeah.
made me feel like, okay, I get that
I
she's
hate
powerful,
that.
but just maybe say, oh man, how dumb did you make Black Bolt and Mr. Fantastic? Because Mr. Reed Richards is historically known to be basically the smartest man in the room, yet he gave away his power set to a magical godlike being. And granted, he doesn't know her and what her exact capabilities are, but he wouldn't be such a dead-on-arrival giveaway about what he can do.
You know what?
Dude,
Nick,
and that
to point
was
out something
dumb.
brilliant. They wrote Mr. Fantastic as if he were Johnny Storm.
Yeah.
Johnny Storm.
No, Johnny. See, I can buy that more Johnny Storm because Johnny Storm he's more teenage like Johnny
moron.
like he's more as much as I love Storm. Yeah, he's a moron. He doesn't think logically about those things. Reed is 10 steps ahead. He knows not to play like that. Like,
Yeah.
and then there's the whole like I'm not sure if you guys piece this together, but between White Vision and also when Wanda kills off Reed, is do your kids have a mom? What's this whole issue that they have with dads in this movie? Like they just freaking hate like fathers in this movie between No Vision, killing Reed Richards because your mother will do fine. Like I was like, bro, like okay,
Well,
I get it.
It's not so much the movie saying that; it's Wanda saying that because the relationship that Doctor Strange has with America Chavez is very much kind of like a fatherly.
Yeah, that was a pretty
thing.
good.
I enjoyed that.
relationship.
I
I
thought it was
did too. I actually appreciate America like being the one who is actually like she went from I don't like you. This Doctor
There's
Strange
Tom.
too. Hey, you know what? You're a pretty good guy.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Neil here. I don't like how Reed was taken out. Here's my impression of
I
how
hated it.
Reed Richards was taken out in this film.
Spaghetti.
Hi, I'm Mr. Fantastic. Whoa, I'm stretching. Oh, what's this? Scarlet Witch. Ah! 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 I wish I had like 20 of them at once. But yeah.
And it
Ah!
Yeah, he was Twizzlered.
Matches your shirt there, bro.
Tom, I want that shirt so bad.
Nice shirt, man. Yeah.
And
It
I'm
matches.
sorry. I just seeing you read that just kind of got me on a tangent. So I apologize.
I hate that scene. I hate everything about the entire Illuminati. I hate the Illuminati anyway, but I hate
Me too.
I hate it from the comics, but I hate that scene. I don't really hate the movie as much as most people, but that scene makes me sick. I hate every inch of it.
So, Mike, do you agree that the Illuminati premise in the comics is a betrayal to the moral
Garbage.
code of all the characters involved?
It's a betrayal to all of superheroes, the very concept of superheroes.
Exactly.
And that's why I hate it.
despised it.
I hate Civil War. I hate Mark Millar and a lot of his garbage, and I hate that comic. But I better not get started on that. I mean, Civil War the comic, not the movie so
Looks
much.
like a tasty death. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. It will be in just a moment when I'm done reading this. Elizabeth Olsen told me Wanda was originally supposed to kill even more people. What did she mean by that? Well, there were more people, maybe not necessarily in that sequence, but I talked to her about her as kind of a T-1000 in that assault on Kamar-Taj. She's unstoppable. So yeah, there's maybe stuff that we never even shot, but cool little one-on-one fights between her and some of those sorcerers. There was some amazing concept art that we never actually shot. You were instrumental in creating Loki, the Disney Plus series, and establishing the multiverse as a force within the MCU. Did you ever look at connecting that show with this film in any way? If it had been necessary, I think we could have, but as it was, it felt, even to me, like we were just reaching. Nothing would have made me happier than to write dialogue for Tom or Owen or Sophia, but it felt like this was a story happening separate of that TVA purview. And that might have complicated things. This movie was already handling a lot, and just that might have just confused things even further. So I think we were okay with it. Well, if you would have done it, as I said, as a Disney Plus event, you could have done it as like 3 episodes or
Probably.
4 episodes.
You know what's kind of interesting though? Like you can take Wanda waking up from her dream walking, but you can also insert 2 other Elizabeth Olsen roles that actually relate to MCU in a very peculiar way. The first one is you can make her dreaming of the time where she played the daughter in Old Boy, and she just relives the scene of her having sex with James Brolin, who looks a lot like Thanos because it is Thanos. And then you do the Godzilla part where she's married to her brother, and you just have like the nightmare thing.
Oh no, they say
like,
he's got to go.
Like
By
you
the
can
way,
cross edit those to a very interesting traumatic thing.
Even though he doesn't deserve an apology, I apologize to Mike Millar. I got across my blames it was actually that worse idiot, Brian Michael Bendis, who created the Illuminati.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got my blame straight. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, just a moment. We have a very special guest joining us. This is a man who doesn't get to join us very often, but I love him so very much, and we actually get to see him from his new surroundings. Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Well, hello. I just saw your link.
Hello, Soldier of the Future.
Yeah,
I like that shirt.
Oh, there you go. A lot of, it's an obscure reference, but if you get it, you get it, and you get it. Yes, I'm here in the soon to be new Rob Observatory.
Awesome sauce.
Yeah, I've been cutting speaker wire.
Nice.
Ooh.
So working on the new surround sound system I'm putting in here. I mean, it's gonna. I mean, it's gonna be bigger. I'm not right up against the wall. You can't really tell, but it's about 10 feet from where I'm sitting to behind me.
So it's an improvement. It's a plus. You're getting more space. That's the upside.
I'm not getting more space in here, but it's going to be designed from the outset. It's pretty great because I've got lights that'll shine down and beams and all kinds of. It's great.
I saw your tour video. I like the little you have like a little side room to the
the side room over there where it's full of all kinds of goods. It's like a workroom, which is great because I can put up an airbrush and finally have a place to build my model rockets and Starship models.
It's funny you're here because I was talking. Well, it's not funny here. I sent you the link, but
by the way, I've been blocked on Twitter by Akiva Goldsman.
Awesome
Oh,
sauce.
man.
Come on,
You are
man.
now my idol again.
We'll have to
Badge
ask
of
what
honor.
for here, but I just gotta say I was talking about you this morning because we're gonna be giving away a Mexican copy of the Next Generation Blu-ray set on Midnight's Edge
Ooh.
Espanol. And I wanted to discuss with you a little bit about giving that away because we're thinking about doing like a trivia contest. We'd like to get you involved in that at some point.
I would love that. I've been watching your content, the Midnight's Edge content lately, and it's been quite good. I do not get tired of your new opening logo and music.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. It's great.
Looks like
So
we got some of the Echo Bass in the house. I don't know if that's Nick or. If
By the
that's
way,
Coach, but
Echo
no.
Base did send me a Blu-ray, which I received, and I was going to show it on the next Let's Get Physical Media
Sweet.
of the Blu-ray of their documentary. So
Oh,
shout
nice.
out to them for doing so.
Awesome sauce. But yeah, so we're glad to have you here. So what did you do to piss off Akiva?
You know what? Have an opinion.
Oh, there you go. That's horrible.
I don't
dare
know.
you.
It's funny. I actually met him about 20 years ago. He was friends with one of the producers who subsequently who's passed away. He was friends with Alan Kaufman, and I met him at a party once, and we hung out for a couple hours in the kitchen of a party and talked. I mean, I don't have anything against him, as a person. At all. I just wish he was a better writer, and that I'll never be satisfied with what they're doing with Star Trek because they're just trying to replace the original series, and it's
just getting obnoxious now. Yeah,
and it's not. I mean, if it was great, if it was like Vince Gilligan quality of writing in a Breaking Bad or a Better Call Saul, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be all for that. But they don't know what the word allegory means.
No, I think they think it's a type of leather.
Yeah, and you look at it, it's so on the nose.
Well, I brought
this
this
stuff and I'm like,
point up earlier. We have 5 shows running right now of Star Trek. That's just as many other types of Star Trek we've had previous to this point, right? We've had 5 iterations. Now we have at the same time 5 of them, and all of them are shit. Not a single fucking one of them is any good.
No.
Well, what's really I think frustrating is it's bad science fiction. And I feel like everybody who writes the show has been in therapy for 20 years, and they want through their writing I really feel it's all therapy speak, and all the characters talk like Tallulah, stop it. Whenever I talk about Star Trek, she gets angry. Come here.
Well,
Come here.
I'll put it to you this way. A lot of the writers on current Star Trek are more fans of the Ronald D. Moore Battlestar Galactica than they are of science fiction. And that's a big problem because as much as I enjoy that Battlestar Galactica, it doesn't deal with allegory in any sort of really deep way. It's really about the immediacy of the moment. And with Star Trek, they understand urgency, but the thing that makes a Starfleet officer is that they're the best of the best, and they're able to assess a situation in a quick and effective way in order to do what they do. And then on top of that, they also get the prime directive wrong.
Right. 100%.
Like the prime directive says you cannot influence or change the course of history of another species. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't actually talk to them and say, hey, how's it going? Or help them out in a situation that is not going to influence them in another way. Like if a shuttle is launching from, say, a pre-warp civilization, and all of a sudden a comet comes out of the way and it's going to hit them, they can stop the comet with a tractor beam or something, and it's not going to affect them so long as they don't sort of reveal enough information about them that could cause them to change their course of culture and technology and all that other stuff. Because I mean, Kirk went and visited other planets before, not really looking disguising himself as that.
No.
And it proved not to be an issue, and that's because it isn't. It's all about the exploration. You have to have a little bit of risk. The only thing is like you can't impose Starfleet or Federation values on another species, because that is a violation of, that's principally the violation of a prime directive.
Well, also what I find really distressing is that, okay, so the dumbest shit ever, when Pike was on Borath, the Klingon moon, and saw his future. I mean, the whole point is that if you saw your future and you knew that first of all, everyone says he's going to die. He's not going to die. He's going to be horribly disfigured in an accident.
And then be on Talos. He dies on Talos 4 of old age, I guess.
Right. That's another thing. Like, wouldn't he have seen that he goes back to Talos 4 and lives a life of illusion, wrapped up in trouble? What are we doing
Which
here?
I can see a brilliant conflict of interest there, where he's like, I'm living a life. My future is I live a life of illusion, which is pleasurable, but it's not real.
You know, and
there's-
that's what he should really be seeing.
Yeah.
Like I find it so interesting that they keep going back to the first pilot of Star Trek that was rejected, and when they go in and they have Pike see his accident and they just end there, I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not the end of his story.
No.
You know, and what happens? Like, okay, he's living this life of illusion, but what happens if the Telosians and Pike together do something incredible? I mean, maybe they have that in their back pocket, but I doubt it.
No, they
But
don't.
wouldn't that be something interesting, that if Pike, he didn't see the accident, he actually saw what ended up happening with the Telosians and his influence as an old man, you know, and it made no sense to him. Like he's having this
like he
visions.
galvanized the Telosian species so that they could actually be independent again.
Absolutely. And no, they just concentrate on, and here's my problem. That's why it's bad science fiction. They always take the most overt, easy to understand thing. Well, he has this accident, and that's what he's fixated on. But he didn't die there. And he has a whole life that he leads. I mean, why didn't he? Why, you know, the fact that Spock in a why didn't they touch upon the fact that it's Spock in a, you could say, very emotional outburst, even though it was logical? Spock, because Vulcans are compassionate, wanted his captain, his former captain, to lead a life rather than be a vegetable, took him back to Talos 4 and took him back there so he could live a full life in his mind with the Telosians. But they don't touch on that. And they've made it now the character of Pike has to deal with, well, I have this terrible accident I've seen. But it's like, dude, that wasn't the end of your life.
Well, I think how it goes to the fact that when it comes to the mindset of the people that they hire for writing Star Trek, it's more about the disability or the inequity than it is about the overall of the character. Because if you were to say, script doctor, I want you to write an episode of Pike and his crew, and I want it to kind of take place at or around the time of the Cage pilot, I would be like, I would rather write the episode that's before the Cage, because it's basically it's the episode that traumatizes, not so much traumatizes, but causes Pike to reconsider the responsibilities of being a captain.
Rigel 7.
Yeah, when he's on Rigel and
he's
on
on Rigel 7, because that conversation with him and Dr. Boyce, which is also a travesty that Boyce isn't in this show.
It is unbelievable to me. An original character that's original to the Cage, and they got rid of him.
How about the fact that they don't
ridiculous.
They don't have Pike dealing with his uncomfortable perspective of having women on the bridge, excluding number one, because his entire senior crew is women except for Spock.
Yeah, and they sex changed one of them, Jose.
Yes, and then the dumbest thing ever. Oh, we need to beam the chemical into Spock's eye. It's like it's a transporter. It's administered through the blood. You can just beam it into his blood. But on top of that, why are you using genetic manipulation of a genome that you don't actually have, when you have visual reconstructive surgery, which is far more akin to what Star Trek does, because it doesn't fail on you unless you have it changed again physically.
Why in the beginning of this first episode is Pike taking a shuttle to the Enterprise, and then when they get next to the Enterprise, they beam him off the ship?
Jesus Christ.
And I mean, here's that seed garden. Is that around Jupiter or Saturn? Because I couldn't tell. It was such a weird, obscure shot. I don't know where that was. And they call it Starbase 1, but Starbase 1 is in orbit of Earth.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I guess as a lifelong fan, all of this extra added lore, just like in Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, or pick your franchise, lore is important. And when I was growing up reading non-canonical or canonical stuff, all of that, like there was a series of books that came out called The Best of Trek, and they were essays taken from a Star Trek fanzine called
Love
Trek.
those books. Trek, yeah,
those books. I read those books over and over, and they were essays written by huge fans that would delve into character, delve into stories, delve into inconsistencies in the universe, and it took everything very seriously, and it showed, you could read these things, and it felt it gave the universe extra added import. And when I watch these modern shows, they're so on the nose, and you're missing, because they just ignore any kind of lore at all. And not only that, they also ignore common sense. Like, if there is a quasi-military organization called the United Federation of Planets, and they have an adjunct branch, Starfleet Command, how does Starfleet Command work? What is the command structure? Nobody ever thinks about this. It's all very surface. Like watching the new season of Picard, no one stopped and said, okay, wait a minute. So now you have a new Borg queen who's been a Borg queen for 400 years. So does the Alice Krieger Borg queen that we met in First Contact, if this benevolent Borg queen is there the whole time, why did the Battle of Wolf 359 happen?
Yeah.
Why did all of the Borg stories that occurred in Next Generation and Voyager happen, and Enterprise happen? Like this new
you
Borg
have this rival hive. You have this rival hive. They don't think things through. Like when they introduced the Saladin class in Strange New Worlds, and then they said it had only a crew of 3. I'm like, you can't man a ship like that with 3 people. Like
the
our
primary
space shuttle
is the same
needed
size as
4
the
at minimum.
Enterprise.
Yeah, it's
And they don't,
all that
and
wasted
it's just,
space for 3 people.
They don't even, and what, did they all beam down? So they left the ship unmanned in orbit around this planet. Like it's and these are common sense things that I watch, and I watch these things and I want to scoop my eyeballs out with a teaspoon. And if you
do that, they win. That's the problem. They want people who love the thing to hate themselves for it. If anything, you should love yourself more, because you're like, this is not the standard of what got me to my fandom to fall in love with this shit.
Exactly.
It's not Star Trek. None of it is.
Yeah. And I can hear Mikey screaming in the back of my head. Super chats.
Oh yes.
We got a couple here already for Robert. So if you don't mind, I'm going to grab a few of these. And I'm going to get them a little out of order. Sorry about that, Six. I know that drives you nuts. Play the High Note sends in 20 Australian dollars. It says Robert Meyer Burnett said what Patrick Stewart said in Doctor Strange 2 to Akiva. We should tell him the truth.
Yeah, I mean, look, God bless everybody for having a job, but look, I used to be a paid consultant in the 90s for Viacom, consulting on what was good and what was bad Star Trek. I have been a professional Star Trek consultant in my life. I worked on the Star Trek Experience. I spent 3 years of my life creating documentaries for Next Generation and Enterprise. We had 2 lawyers dedicated to us because Roger Lay and I were creating we created like 50 hours of new programming in 3 years for 2 different sets of discs. And yeah, they were documentaries, but we were doing deep dives into the making of Next Generation and Enterprise. And it's frustrating, to have been doing that. And people are like, well, Rob, you're just jealous because Axanar didn't work out, or you're jealous because you're not working. Look, I've never worked in TV. I've directed 5 episodes of a Skinamax show. That's my extent of television experience. So I will tell you, no one's ever going to hire me to be in a writer's room. I've never done that before. There's no reason why they would. But it is frustrating to watch. Star Trek should be the best written science fiction television show right now in history, because there's more episodes of Star Trek. I think there might be more of like Doctor Who, but there's more episodes, there's more novels, there's more comics, there's more Star Trek stories that you can look back on, and novels and all that stuff. And the fact that we're getting like this new episode, the pilot episode of Strange New Worlds, opens with a voiceover of one of our characters talking about what a first contact situation means. It completely violates the idea of show, don't tell. There was a Star Trek movie called First Contact. We've seen how much Close Encounters is dealing with a first contact situation. We get it. The audience understands. Why not do a teaser where we actually see number 1 fuck up and they get captured? It's an action adventure show. Why are we listening to her talking about a first contact situation when she disappears and they don't show us the actual moment when it occurs? If you were to just jump in to the middle of that scene and show them get apprehended, you could have done something really interesting there. That's a teaser. cut to the opening credits, and then you pick up with Pike. So you've set up a moment like, what happened? What's going to happen next? And to watch her tell you this tale where she's literally walking down some corridor in some, I don't know, industrial building as we hear a voiceover, I'm like, what is this? This is not action, adventure, allegorical science fiction. Why are you telling me about First Contact? We all get it.
I've seen the movie.
It's a visual attempt at trying to do a twist because every single shot in that opening conveys that looks like it's somewhere on Earth. But the twist is they turn around and it's aliens. They're like, oh, it's like that is the most low-hanging fruit derivative take you can do on that. And don't get me started on a warp bomb because it's not the same. It's basically it's an antimatter bomb. That's what it is. It's essentially a proton torpedo, but they read it as a warp signature, which they don't even understand the own technicality of that.
No, they don't.
Well, first of all, there's also a great episode of The Next Generation, not the movie, but an episode called First Contact, which is infinitely better than the
best episodes of all.
Infinitely better. I mean, Beebe Newworth is in there. She's like, I've always wanted to sleep with an alien or whatever. I mean, it's so you watch that and you're like, you guys are doing a bargain basement retread of an episode of Next Generation that was really good, and like. I'm supposed to look at it and people are like, well, Rob, it was a pretty good episode. I'm like, no, it's not a pretty good episode. It's a lame retread of something they did much better 30 years ago in The Next Generation. And everyone gets mad at me. And I'm like, just because you don't know that episode, don't expect me to embrace it. We deserve better.
Yeah. See, if I were to do a Star Trek First Contact episode, I probably would take the teaser would be the first warp test of an alien species, and they warp by a moon, and then they drop out of warp. They see a space station on the moon, on their own moon, and they get a text transmission that says "Welcome to the galaxy," and that's your teaser. And then it opens up, and they find out, oh, it's a Starfleet base. They're not physically showing themselves; they're communicating by text and radio because they want to figure out who these people are because they suspected they were going to have warp travel, so they built a little outpost on the moon that's always facing away from the planet, undetectable, that type of thing. And it's just basically a relationship back and forth to be like, okay, they broke the warp barrier, but let's say they have a society where they have a culture where they have believed that they're the only ones in the galaxy, and their entire reason for expanding is to colonize the rest of the galaxy. And now that entire philosophy is challenged because there's other people out there. And now they have to now you have the question of, well, if everything that we believe led us to this point turns out to be wrong, how do we go from there? Like, your entire culture is completely shattered. The ethos of your culture is shattered because of the existence of other people. And how does Starfleet and the representatives react to that, and how do they navigate that? Like, that is an interesting story for our television, for me at least. That's what I would do, because I haven't seen that in Star Trek.
I know, and also I think it's a great idea with this episode. Open amidst the action. Give us a teaser that is fascinating and interesting, and show us some. Don't have voiceover. A voiceover teaser is. If you're in a screenwriting course, they'll tell you to never use voiceover.
Exactly. The captain's log was for commercials only, really.
And also the captain's log was a really interesting way to set the scene. Yeah. It's like a narrator, and they only use the captain's log to as the same way they use the transporter as a way to not have to show a shuttle fly down to a planet. It was a very elegant, interesting way to just allow our characters to go from the ship to the surface quickly and easily. And the captain's log was kind of fun because if it's well written, you got a sense of what was going on in Kirk's mind. So it was both character building and it was giving you information about what our setting today is.
It was also the equivalent of like what Stan Lee would say, like, every comic book was somebody's first comic book. So he'd like to throw in there a little background on the character and how they became to be. If you happen to be catching Star Trek halfway through the show, I missed the first half. Doesn't matter. You're going to get
supplemental log. This has happened. Yeah.
Yeah. You get real quick right after the commercial break. Every time the captain comes in usually and says captain's log, this is what's going on, setting up where we are. And you can just get right back into the show. You didn't have to see the rest of it. So there's that aspect of it too. Yeah.
And another thing that I really can't stand, Star Trek is a period piece about a future that doesn't exist.
Yep.
So the idea that you actually show footage from our world today, the January 6th insurrection or whatever, is, I'm like, you've missed the point. I mean, Star Trek had the eugenics wars in 1996. It's not our future. So when you show things that happen in our world in Star Trek, it's weird. It doesn't work. I mean,
well, specific things generally, because I did like in some of the other Star Trek shows, especially in the original series, where they showed clips of various parts of the NASA program starting up. But it wasn't
no, of
predictive.
course.
It wasn't specific, like general abstracts is what you're supposed to be doing there.
That's exactly
they were
right.
specific, and that's an insult not only to our current era of times, but to anyone watching this 5-10 years from now, because they're gonna have way more context and disclosure of what actually went on in those events than we as a species do now. Like the benefit of hindsight, we don't have that now, so it's really foolish to do such a thing. It would have been better if he said, the eugenics war occurred in 1996, but what we never knew at the time is that it started during our dawn of the space age program in the 60s, because that's when it had to have been, right, for Khan to have been born and raised and whatnot. Well, but it's like you can always be distracted by the pursuit of technology instead of looking at yourselves to what really is going on. And there's a great speech that could have been made there, and then you could have used the digital effects of nuclear war as a World War III, because I had no problem with that. It was just all the other stuff around it that was just incredibly superficial.
Well, and not only that, but like I was this year, actually in June, is the 40th anniversary of Blade Runner's release. And when they decided to make Blade Runner 2049, they made a decision to say, okay, obviously our future today is different than the Blade Runner future that we saw in 1982. So they're like, okay, that future is not our future. It was a different future where it was much more analog. And so when they decided to make Blade Runner 2049, the decision was made to extrapolate upon the technology as it, like in Blade Runner, they had flying cars, but they never got cell phones, so it was much more analog. So in Blade Runner 2049, they kept that aesthetic. When they stored data, it was different than how we stored data because it wasn't our universe. It was a different universe. It was the Blade Runner universe, the cinematic universe. And they extrapolated upon that. Well, with Star Trek, it's its own thing. It was a universe that was originally conceived of in the mid-'60s. But yet, modern Star Trek is always trying to push our present into Star Trek's future. And it's not that. Yep. It's a Star Trek future that isn't ours. We share things. Lincoln was president in the Star Trek future, or the Star Trek past as well. But, there was never a eugenics wars. There was, well, hopefully there's not going to be a World War III, but it's looking increasingly likely that there might be. But it was different. So it's a science fiction again, Star Trek is an alternate future history that never existed. And they keep trying to shoehorn as the years go by to add, like, for instance, when I'm watching young Guinan, and by the way, I love the actress who is playing
me too.
young Guinan. I thought she was fantastic. She looked great. She was great. But when she's talking about racism, she's an Illurian. She's an alien that presumably has been on Earth for 100 years. And the idea that she happens to look like a Black American, she isn't one. And she understands all this. And when she's angry in her bar, which, by the way, they called 10 Forward. I mean,
because they didn't get it. That's why.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, guys, the 10th deck on the Enterprise D, and they're at the forward section of the ship. It was literally called what it is. It was called 10 Forward. That nobody. This is 10. This is Forward Street. With I mean, you watch this and you're like, you guys, you don't even get what it is you're watching. And then when
Rob, it's like if imagine if an Asgardian in like the Thor universe was trying to use modern lingo, saying like post-truth or my truth. Those things don't fit within Asgardian dialogue. Like, I'm not as well versed as you guys are on Trek, but I do get where you're coming from, because I would be that's how I would feel like if I read a Thor story and they were speaking, modern Earth speak. And I'm like, this doesn't fit the context. So I can at least relate to you in that regard. Like, yeah, if I was a Trekkie, I'd be like, what? What it is? That's like Earth lingo? That doesn't resonate with Trek.
Well, the funny thing is it just tells me the producers don't even know what they're showing us.
No,
they don't know that. They do not know why 10 Forward was called 10 Forward. They just thought they were being cheeky.
Do you think that they're trying to replace the
watched the
Trekkies
show.
with the normies?
And they
don't know
think
they never
Guinan's been a
watched the
bartender.
show.
Here's the other part. They think Guinan has been a bartender her entire life.
They never
Oh,
watched
for
Star Trek.
fuck's sake! It was it was because of the type of alien she was. It just lent herself to the fact that a bartender sits there.
Right, a listener.
Oh my fucking!
Yeah,
God. I get that, and I'm a casual Star Trek fan in a way. Like,
Well,
I mean, I'm a fan, but I would my knowledge compared to you guys, right? Like, no way. Like, and I know that.
Well, and it's like, when they're trying to make excuses for this, and they're saying, well, why doesn't Guinan know Picard in this past? Because, they met in San Francisco in the 1800s. They didn't watch that episode. It's not on anyone's list as one of the 25 best episodes of Next Generation.
No.
You have 178 episodes of the Next Generation. You think they watched Time Zero Part 1 and 2? No.
No, I don't
It
think
never
they
shows
did.
up on anyone's list of anything.
But here's the other
Nor
part too.
should it.
They come from a time where Picard probably never went back to Time Zero, because here's the thing that I would have had if I'm doing this show. Is like, he goes to Guinan, he's like, Guinan, it's me. He's like, who are you? And then he realizes, oh, I'm from the future of an evil Federation that never existed, where I had no reason to ever go back in time to Time Zero to get data. So
Right.
And then when he goes back to the present, Guinan's be like, yeah, there's two realities of when we first met that I had to keep one a secret for a while, because I'm a Lorian. I'm perspective to those changes. So the first time, but the other part too, you could always play back like, I feel like I know you, but there's just something off. And
Which, by the way, is exactly what happened in yesterday's Enterprise.
yes,
When she says, all I know is that this is
Feel
wrong.
They even did
You
that in Generations, because she's like, anyway, go on. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, but here's the thing: they've already done all this, and when you watch these new shows and they don't understand any of that, it makes you as a longtime viewer, and the excuse is they're not making it for you, Rob. I'm like, oh, okay, if you call it Star Trek, you're making it for me. I'm a Star Trek fan.
Yes.
I like Star Trek. The reason I'm tuning in is because it's Star Trek. You're not going to get the idea that you're going to get people that have never seen Star Trek before. There will be some, but the whole reason that you've created more of a part of an IP is to get the people that already watch it to come subscribe to your channel.
It's like
because
they
you're going to
forgot-
give them more.
It's like they forgot how, like, look, nobody agrees with what the tobacco industry did, but when it comes to how they did it, they were spot on, especially when it comes to how you keep an old customer and create a new one, right? You need to basically adopt that across the board when it comes to like franchise stuff, right? IPs and whatnot. You want to maintain that base as best you can while creating something that's going to draw in the new audience, right? Spider-Man No Way Home is a great example of how to do that, right?
Yeah.
You've got the new MCU version meeting the last two generation versions of this character. So you're bringing in all sorts of different, people into this, and that's the way you want to do it. It used to be that way. You used to want to, when these movies would come out, the only time they would really suffer from being like too many cooks in the kitchen or having such a broad kind of idea for its characters or its workings is because they were trying to, get to too many people. Right. And now they're too focused on one set of people and they're alienating everybody else. They need to find that happy medium again where it's, not everybody's going to like this, but some people are, and you make it for that specific customer.
What I find so strange is that, let's say you want to address, like in Star Trek Discovery, they have in the 32nd century, they have a character who's non-binary. 1,000 years from now, in a galaxy where you have interspecies marriages,
Wouldn't matter.
Where Amanda Grayson is married to Sarek, a Vulcan. They had Spock. and they're talking about pronouns in the 32nd century.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is the science fiction version of that 1,000 years from now? Like human beings with our technology, if we're here 1,000 years from now, between biotech, Borg technology, whatever, we would be unrecognizable. We would have implants. We would live 1,000 years ourselves.
Not only that, all these same concepts have already been explored in TNG and other places in Star Trek universe already.
But Ross poses a great question, because I think that version of it would be someone that rejects the Borg implants, that rejects the addition of having an infinite life, because it's like life is precious enough as it is. Why I want to enjoy it as I can, as opposed to get dependent and tired of it, because I would be living so long naturally.
Yeah, I mean, and that's my problem with modern Star Trek is it's not exploring any interesting science fiction concepts. Everybody, even 1,000 years from now, is just another one of us today.
Yeah, because it's not about the human truth anymore, or the human experience. It's about my truth and their experience. That's what
and it's weird. I mean, I hate to say it. I don't have anything against therapy, but I feel like everybody is they all were self-actualized in their therapy sessions, and they want to incorporate it into their writing. And I'm like, that isn't what science fiction is. You know, science fiction is about a world where we are different and we are better and we are not of today.
Right. And I think you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just saying humanity. What would I mean, if you go back, if you brought somebody, we've said this on this show, I think before, if you took a human being from 1,000 years ago and brought them to right now, they would be lost. They would look around and go, I don't know what the fuck is going on. They wouldn't have any concept of a computer, the internet, the idea that the way we connect with one another, the way we can travel around the planet, nothing would be familiar. And yet when the Discovery goes 1,000 years in the future, they're the saviors of the galaxy.
It's the idea of progressivism, of actual progressivism. It's regressivism.
Yeah, absolutely. The people from 1,000 years ago are the only ones that can save us. I mean, it's so dumb. And it also shows a profound fundamental lack of imagination on the part of the writers of these shows. I mean, there is no imagination. There's no, they don't understand allegory. They're trying to make the people 1,000 years from now just like us today.
Well,
yeah, I would say in 1,000 years from now, being on a starship going from planet to planet would be out of leisure, because I think they would have like instant teleportation from planet to planet. They would not need.
Well, you're introducing
like
tried that crap at 09. George R. Abrams.
We're getting to the point where a lot of scientists are realizing that traveling at the speed of light ain't going to do shit. We got to go faster than the speed of light.
Oh, they've known that for a long time.
And exactly. So like you're getting to a whole nother level of shit here. And at that point, then you run into all kinds of paradox problems. So like I don't want to get down that road, but like, no. And I think you're right. And then not only that, I think they're missing like the simplicity of it, right? Like what you were saying, Robert, like one of my favorite Star Trek stories, and I'm sorry, I'm pulling out a movie here, but I feel like this is one that is one of the best gateways into Star Trek. And that is Star Trek 4. Why does it work so well? Because it has such a simple, fucking straightforward plot, and it plays so well with every element, right? You have a situation where there is this huge fucking probe that is destroying everything in its fucking path, and we don't know at first, but then we realize it's looking for an answer, right? And it's not getting said answer, much like the plot to the first Star Trek movie, right? But in that same situation, like, you know, it takes somebody to figure out, Spock being that person, that it's waiting for a whale song. Well, we have a problem. We killed all the whales back in the 20th century or whatever, late 21st century. So what is our options here, right? Well, we can't just randomly send back a recording because we don't know what it's saying. We don't know what the response needs to be. And Spock also points that out. Very simplistic stuff, right? You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that this probe's making a call, and the person they need to answer ain't on Earth. So what are your options? You got to go back in time and get a fucking whale, and specifically a humpback whale. Well, so you know, it's just a simple fucking plot, and it works. So
it's still a good science fiction idea,
and it's a great science fiction film. You don't have to be a Star Trek fan to enjoy it. All you get is the idea that these people from the future need this thing that we have now to survive. And that's where it all kind of just sets itself up
But
and it plays so beautifully. But and it also works as a Star Trek film.
There's also an implication there that isn't overt, which is that we are unaware of the potential intelligence that exists all around us, that we, because we're human beings and we're arrogant fucks, that we have missed. And
we missed the message so long, and thanks for all the fish. Exactly.
Thanks for all the fish. You know, and this idea that there are things on this planet. It's interesting because Brian Fuller's original conception for Discovery, the mycellular network that they've turned into a fucking propulsion system, was used. It was used in the original conception of Discovery as a terraforming device. It was a quick way using Stamets, the actual scientist that studies fungi and all that. They used him, and there's an episode of Hannibal where Brian Fuller touched on that actual scientist, and that was what it was all about. One of those writers said, well, let's do it, and it'll be like folding space and Dune, and we'll change it around, which is the dumbest shit in the world. Because if you can go anywhere in the universe, why are you staying in the Milky Way?
Yeah.
Why not go to Andromeda? Why not go find out, go see go to other, if you could go, but they don't really mean that. It's like, we can go anywhere in the universe. Okay, well, why are you staying local? If you can go anywhere in the universe, why not go 10 billion years away from the Milky Way and do some real exploration? But they don't understand the difference between going anywhere in the universe and our galaxy. They don't get it.
It's like the immature kid that gets a car for the first time and it's like, I'm only going to drive it in town. I'm never going to leave.
They probably don't even.
And when you hear this on the show, anybody who understands this, I want to like punch someone in the face. Like right now, we have the James Webb Telescope, which they've started to send out some of the image.
Is that the one that caught the image of Saturn recently?
No, but
no, this is a brand new one. They had to readjust the lens, I think, a few months ago, and they did it successfully. So it's all,
it was. Okay. Well, they just launched it. It's the
most so this is. Oh, never mind. Not the one. Never mind.
And it could have failed. This will change our understanding of the universe in the most profound ways. And when they first got, because they didn't know if it would work, you know, and it worked. It took them 25 years to make this. But they put out a picture of the previous version of what we were able to see, and then the version that the James Webb Telescope gave. It was the difference between a VHS tape and 4K.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's
galaxies,
unbelievable. And you know, you look at this and you're like, okay, guys, the people that are writing this show do not know the difference between galaxies and the universe.
I was just going to say that. That's what I was going to say when I.
Well, they also don't know the difference between light speed and time. Because
that too, and that gets me back to my whole point I was saying before too. And that's where it's like, okay, the bending of time. Well, then what the fuck is this whole lights? You can't. Never mind. Anyway, Mr. Tickle Trunk says R&B is always a gentleman and a scholar. As you can tell there, he waxed intellectual for quite some time about Star Trek, and we appreciate everybody's patience. And
I just get angry because I
who else is angry? Angry Joe over Picard season 2.
By the way, I've started watching him. I wasn't aware of his channel. I've started watching him just to watch his Star Trek reviews, and they're great.
Echo Base Network sends in $5 and says he's evidently Robert's seen it, but I have not seen that Angry Joe reviews for Picard because I avoid Picard like the plague. But I guess he gave his first ever 0 rating.
2 right.
Oh wow!
Now deserved it.
It's just so like
bad.
Here's the thing. Like they've raped and pillaged all of Star Trek. It's like, let's go back to Assignment Earth and use the supervisors.
Yeah.
Let's use the Traveler. Let's use the Borg Queen. Let's use Q. What's amazing is let's use all of this stuff other writers and creators already created.
Of course.
Well,
why not
keep a Goldsman moniker?
They're a lot like Marvel and DC Comics. They just use the creations of others.
I mean, what I don't understand is Star Trek Picard is, and I've said this before, I'll say it again. Script, you've probably heard me say this. There's a great book that one of my favorite writers is a guy named Dan Simmons, and he wrote a book called Phases of Gravity. And it's a fictional book, but it's about a fictitious astronaut who's landed on the moon. And now he's, it's 30 years on. And the best thing, the most incredible thing he's ever done in his life happened 30 years ago. And how do you, as a human being, find meaning in your life if the best thing you've ever going to do happened 30 years ago? How do you continue on and find meaning. Which I grapple with that question a lot myself, and I'm like, that's a great jumping off point for a Star Trek story.
That's actually the jumping off point for Cobra Kai too. But anyway,
No, you know what? I was going to bring. You're exactly no, but you're exactly right. If you look at the first episode of Cobra Kai, look at Johnny.
He's living in the past. Yeah,
that first episode of Cobra Kai, he's a schlep rock. His life didn't amount to anything, you know. And when I watched the first episode of Cobra Kai, I'm like, wow, these people get it,
right?
Man. They get it. They understand. And I'm not saying, the thing about Picard is Picard is not the kind of guy that would allow himself to fall into that rut. You know, he retires from Starfleet. His first love is archaeology. He would probably be at the forefront of making some amazing discoveries because of what he found while he was a starship captain. The Iconian gateways, or the episode The Chase, where they find the humanoids that were the basis of all the humanoid culture in the you know, the Milky Way galaxy that's seeded. So why wouldn't you start from a position of strength where Picard is leading his best life? Why is he retired to his chateau? Because you know why? Because people are like, oh, you got to watch Family. They didn't watch any of the other episodes. They didn't watch The Chase.
I don't even think they really watched Family and understood what that episode was about.
No.
They don't understand Star Trek. None of them do.
No, because I would love to see a show of Picard. He is as an archaeologist, because that's what he does. He's a fan of the stars. And there's great, I mean, just imagine, like, he's got a ship and he goes to a planet as an archaeologist, but he is surgically altered as the local alien. So he's learning their culture while he's also trying to discover more origins about them. And it's not for his own personal gain. He's like, I can find artifacts about this species and present it to the species to help them enrich their own culture without violating the Prime Directive, because I'm not imposing anything from Federation on this. I'm just looking, and then I can log it for myself. So many things that would make Picard interesting, but Patrick Stewart doesn't want to play those types of roles anymore.
But also, but he also doesn't read science fiction. He isn't that guy. He doesn't think that way. And you know, what Picard needs is something like, for instance, that's a great setup. What if Picard found something that would, you know, and talk about Akiva Goldsman. I mean, what if, like in the Da Vinci Code, what if you went that direction and Picard discovered as an archaeologist something that would profoundly affect the belief systems, even in the modern Star Trek era, of 10 different races?
Oh, God, that's heavy stuff. I like
that. Would he reveal it? And so what he has to do is he finds, like in The Chase, that episode of TNG, he has to go on a quest and discover something that about the origins of life in the universe, and something that would shake him to his core, but leads him on a very science fiction 2001-esque, you know, whatever that journey is. He finds the equivalent of the monolith or something. And he goes out and he's like, and do I even do this? And if I do it, what is my responsibility to report back to the rest of the galaxy? Do I tell people? What if it's a truth that people are they can't accept or something? And yet all we got, like, I've never seen a time travel story that was so full of gobbledygook as Picard season 2. There was nothing about it that was compelling. I mean, what was interesting about like Star Trek 4 is these characters went back in time and they had to navigate the world. Exactly. And it was fun. It wasn't like in this case, you know, it was so pedestrian. It's like in one scene, Rafi and Seven have to like get a security guard to let them take a picture. I mean, that scene was just the most, I hate to say cringe, but it was so unimaginative and so dumb. It's like, oh, a security guard is your big threat? Well, I don't know if I'm going to let you do this. I mean, it's Jerry Ryan. Even a 50-year-old Jerry Ryan, when she smiles at you, you're like, hey.
Right this way, miss. Yeah, because what you putting on something great, especially with like Picard and what Cobra Kai is once you pass that, if you peak young, your responsibility is not so much to yourself. Like it's you coming to terms with the fact that, okay, you peaked young. What can you do next? Well, you can use that peaking to try and inspire the next generation as the person that inspired you to peak. And that's a difficult thing for an adult to do, because there's a shadow or an echo of it being like, okay, your life is kind of over with regards to your achievements. But what you end up having to realize is that your achievements have a scalable effect where you can actually help 5 or 10 more people do something great, as the person who inspired you helped 5 or 10 more people do something great, and it just keeps on going exponentially. And when you get to that moment, that's where you actually have that fulfillment where you're like, yeah, I may have peaked for myself at this point, but my next peak is the fact that I'm getting all these other kids, people below me, to be the best that they can be, and that's going to carry on forward and forward. I'm going to have more influence over them at a later point in my life than I did from when I landed on the moon at 28.
Yeah. Well, sadly, Nick has to leave us now because he has to run and get ready for his show, which I will share the link for here pretty soon. We're going to be doing Rocky 2 over on Toxic Tuesday tonight. So I'll hopefully be joining as soon as I'm done here, Nick, and I'll see you there. So thank you for being here.
Have you ever heard Tarantino talk about Rocky 2?
I have, actually. I have.
He talks about he wax rhapsodic about why Rocky 2 is his favorite Rocky movie.
And it's an interesting, he does have some good points, Robert. He really does, and I'm actually a big defender of Rocky 2 myself. I love Rocky 2.
Me too. I love Rocky.
I'm excited to talk about it. I'm really excited to talk about it tonight. So, but I have no. By the way, Rob, even though I'm as far as Star Trek goes, I'm a normie, but I do enjoy listening to you talk about it. It does really bring me great insight. I'm like, okay, I can see why he has these complaints and these thoughts. You have very, very well thought out perspective. So I could just listen to it from a normie perspective.
I appreciate that. I think it's so funny to me that the thing that I've loved the most in my life in terms of a franchise, I'm now known as this prime hater.
Oh, dude,
which is such a weird.
Come from a place of love. That's the difference. You're coming from a place of being a big fan. Obviously, you're someone who's worked on it, so I don't call it that's not hate. You've literally worked in Star Trek stuff, so it's not like you want it to be great. You're not saying this just to bash it. You're saying it because you want to love Star Trek even more than you already have, and that's saying a lot because you have all the Star Trek you can enjoy the rest of your life, and you can be satisfied. But you still
look what's sitting behind me right
better.
now. 1/350 scale refit Enterprise. And by the way, you want to hear something cool? So, wait, hang on. How do I do this? Wrong way. See this picture, this poster?
Yeah.
This poster. It's a it's a Drew Struzan painting of Kirk.
Nice.
There's also Spock and McCoy. Brian Fuller gave these to me.
Oh wow, dude!
And they were hanging. They were hanging in the Discovery production offices. Yeah, you can see there.
Oh wow!
So behind is Spock and McCoy. They're wrapped up. And then there's another piece of artwork I bought at Disney, which is kind of a pop art of the saucer section of the Enterprise. But these were actually hanging in during pre-production of Discovery.
Well, speaking of hanging, thanks for hanging with us, Nick, and I'll see you
appreciate it. I'll see you guys all.
I got to get to some of these super chats.
Yeah, good, buddy. Take your time.
Yeah, well, we don't always get a lot of time with R&Bs when we do get in here.
Hey, that's why I was fine being held. That's why I was fine waiting. I'm like, I'll just sit here and listen. This is the best problem that we have.
I'm sorry. You've sent me the link, and I just don't shut up.
No. We don't get you a lot of time, and we love to just listen and ask you questions and get your insights. So thank you, Nick, for being here. And I'll head over there as soon as I can. And then, speaking of super chats here, let's get on.
Take care, guys. Thank
you. Echo Base says, like R&B, I was hyped for Moon Knight, but found the show to be very lackluster at best. Rob, what did you think of it?
Here's the thing. If it wasn't called Moon Knight, I would have loved it. I thought it would be interesting. I was very perplexed. I mean, it's funny because I can't reach him now, but I fell in love with Moon Knight during the Doug Mensch, Bill Sienkiewicz run from 1980 to 82 and a half, 83.
Great run.
And Moon Knight, to me, Moon Knight was a film noir superhero. Like if you had done Batman was a film noir superhero, but Batman didn't have a woman, but Moon Knight did. His girlfriend Marlene, his compatriot Frenchie, and while Moon Knight was originally accused of being a Batman ripoff, I always thought it was a film noir superhero. It felt
more of a shadow rip too, but yeah.
Yeah, and the shadow as well, and I liked that. This version of Moon Knight was so far removed from, I mean, they leaned in, obviously, in the Marvel cinematic or the Marvel comic universe. Khonshu, like Moon Knight, Khonshu wasn't real. You know, he was resurrected. He came back to life, not because of supernatural, because he just didn't die. He was left for dead and awoke in this tomb, and Khonshu was there. Khonshu wasn't an entity. But over the course of the last, I mean, Moon Knight was introduced in 1975, but they've added all of this Egyptian lore, and Khonshu is now a player in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or I mean the Marvel Universe. And to me, they went to the other end of the spectrum of Moon Knight, all this other stuff, and it wasn't what I would have preferred. And frankly, I loved Oscar Isaac. He was amazing. But when I'm watching these two split personalities of Stephen Grant and Mark Spector, it's hard for me because Mark Spector's the real guy. And when he took his fortune and moved to New York, and he created Stephen Grant as his Bruce Wayne persona, he could be part of society. Yeah. And then the Jake Lockley character, he was a cab driver to keep his nose to the grindstone to hear, like, is there something he would drive around to hear things that he needed to know so he could deal justice when he needed to. And then it was fairly recently, you know, in the aughts where they created this dissociative identity disorder. And and it became, what I was watching was very removed. And knowing that, I still enjoyed it because but then it just, to me, got really, really goofy. And again, the cosmology of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Loki, with Eternals, with this, with Thor, with Gore the God Butcher, where they introduced the gods of Olympus. I mean, Russell Crowe's playing Zeus. So what does this all mean? Like, are all of these gods, do they know each other? Like, did the Asgardians know the Egyptian gods? And we're talking to, like, the Norse gods? Like, how does it all work? And do the Celestials control them all? And I just feel it's all kind of goofy. And I wanted something different from Moon Knight.
Yeah.
But I liked what I got if it wasn't a Moon Knight show. Like, I liked the whole idea of the dissociative identity disorder, fight clubs, but the idea that summon the suit, that Moon Knight is summoning this mummy suit. I mean, they've dealt with that in the comics kind of, but it was very weird. Ultimately.
Yeah. Speaking of very weird and disappointing, also, how much worse can Picard season 3 with the original cast get than season 2?
Well, I mean, this idea. Look, I like Terry Matalas. You know, I liked 12 Monkeys, the series, but even he says in interviews, he's like, well, we're going to give them the proper send off. What, as opposed to All Good Things? Like the end of Next Generation has one of the great ending episodes ever. Like, what send off do they need?
Yeah.
Well, if anything, it'd be more like, what type of character assassination are they going to do, and is it going to be passive or active? Because I enjoyed the first 2 seasons of 12 Monkeys. It got really ridiculous when Discount Al Pacino turned into the bad guy. It's I've got a very morbid curiosity for it, but it's not something I'm looking forward to. It just feels like somehow the whatever writing team they hire, the first thing that they do, instead of like figuring out what subject it is they're writing about, they talk to the actors and get their opinion, which is always a bad idea, because you never want to get an actor's opinion before a part. You want to get their opinion after a part, because actors are not creative enough to inform a role. Like, rarely are they. Maybe like Marlon Brando was at a point in his career when the script was being developed.
Directed.
At least he's directed. Yeah. But you just really don't want that, especially, and it's kind of notorious where the cast of TNG kind of has like 2 perspectives over things. Like, I've talked to Brent Spiner. I got the pleasure of working with him for a bit, and he's like, I'm just more grateful that I had the role and had the job and was able to be so influential over it as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope it's good, but I mean, they leave this weird spatial anomaly that like, what? I don't even.
Yeah, they
what
completely
happened?
abandoned that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on at the end?
I
of
heard
the-
it's another. This is just what I heard, so take it with a grain of salt. It's just I heard that this third season just another swing, of reactionary bullshit, and they got rid of half of the cast, and they're bringing back the OG cast because that's what they know the fans want, and it's their last grasp at it, and it's more of a saying goodbye to Patrick Stewart. I honestly, and I hate saying this, I think we're going to find out soon that he's not doing well, because after seeing him in WandaVision, which will get us to this next super chat here.
Well, I think that they're going to do a search for Spock season because there's no data, and I think they're going to try and bring data back or something. I think they're going to go stupid that way.
Something
I hope
like
they
that.
don't.
But like, yeah, I think that the Patrick Stewart's doing a lot of like, kind of swan song kind of stuff here. Adam Wolford says in the end of House of M, I think he means, she went off and made her own universe with Vision and was able to keep the kids. So also she did screw over everyone in the Marvel U. Yeah, at the start of the show we were talking about Michael Waldron coming out in defense of Wanda's character and a few of the other things in Doctor Strange. I don't know how much you like the movie, Robert. I didn't get a chance to see your complete reaction to it. I think I seen one of your reactions online, but yeah, it's been kind of mixed overall. But how did you feel about the film?
What's interesting is I thought it was a very minor MCU movie, but I worked on Army of Darkness, and I'm a Sam Raimi fan.
Wow.
I thought it was a fun horror one-off. I mean, but it didn't really, like, I kept wondering, I'm like, as far as the MCU goes, none of this matters because the only person who knows it happens is Doctor Strange and Wong. And I guess the people at Comertage, but they don't let you know what's going on anyway. So I thought the movie was a lot of fun. I had fun watching it. I don't think I thought it was the whole idea of the multiverse and all that. It seemed that it made it very trivial, and there are these big ramifications. Like, what happens when you meet another version of yourself? And I was kind of waiting for a little bit more of that to be dealt with, and it wasn't. But I have to say, as a B movie romp, I like a lot of like 80s horror. I think of a movie directed by a guy named Frank LaLoggia called Fear No Evil. It's not a great movie, but it deals with heaven and hell, and I remember seeing it in the theater. I'm like, wow, that was really cool. Is it great? No, but I like watching it. And I kind of felt that way about Doctor Strange. I had a hoot. Like, why we saw the first 20 minutes at CinemaCon, and I'm like, this is awesome. A giant tentacled one-eyed monster attacking New York, and they're Wong and America Chavez and Doctor Strange. I'm like, this is right out of a comic. And it doesn't mean anything. And I keep wondering, I'm like, do the people of the world after Thanos, do they just not pay attention when the Celestials show up, or when someone cracks out of the world and it gets turned to stone in the ocean? Do the people of the earth just don't care?
I think it's just New Yorkers because they get desensitized pretty quickly to stuff.
I guess it is because
It could be.
the cosmology of the Marvel universe is a little suspect to me now.
Well, think about after that set piece scene, literally instantly as they're walking away from that entire travesty that happened on that street, they round the corner and the rest of the New York City is fine. Like cars are driving and obeying traffic signs. There's a guy on a bike turning around and they're just talking casually. And that was actually a joke that I pitched for a Ghostbusters 3 back in like 2007, which is that New York is just used to ghosts. They treat them like rats and cockroaches.
Right.
Because they're just so desensitized over the years, and that's why the Ghostbusters aren't as successful. And there's also competitors that have like Ghost Be Gone and like Raid and all that other stuff, and that they have to compete with. And that was like the premise, which helped me get one step into Sony. But like that was about as far as I could get with them, unfortunately.
Yeah, and as far as the House of M thing, I think a lot of fans wish they would have just stuck closer to the comics as always. But yeah, Tina Bojan says you're trying to apply logic to an emotional need and to someone who has been corrupted by the Darkhold. Logic doesn't apply in those circumstances. I get what you're saying, Tina, but for her to be able to
well, it's desperation over logic. Like that's
exactly,
a very good thing to explore. It's just different. You just need a really good lead up to that, like a very strong cause and effect. Like the desperation of her wanting those imaginary kids back is great. You can have her ignore the fact that they're imaginary. That's perfectly fine because to her they're real. That's part of the delusion.
Right.
You just need that extra step that gets over that hump, so that you can go into the recklessness nature of it.
And the big and again, my problem was it starts setting in about midway through, and that's where I said like you had Wong literally tell her what she has to face at the end of the film, and the film doesn't have her respond to that in any real way until the end of the film, and it's like, no, you had to have a moment where she clearly signifies that she either A, knows this and reason why I don't give a fuck, right? Like that's what you need for the villain, because otherwise then the villain comes off as stupid and illogical. And I know what you're saying as far as an emotional need. Logic doesn't, and I get that, but at the same time it has to come from someplace, and in this case she's not logically thinking this through, because Wong says to her, like I said in so many words, what about the other Wanda? Do you really think she's just going to let you take her kids, right? Like, and so to me, I don't think she thought it enough through for it to even be real enough at that point. For her to have come to the conclusion that she knows she needs America Chavez and all this other business, to me, it's like, why didn't she think of that final step? You know, and that's just me in that respect.
Well,
but
thinking of plan through, like that's another part. Like one of the biggest crimes of bad screenwriting I've seen over the last decade is they don't try to make every character the most cleverest they can be. They actually deliberately try to make the villain dumber than the hero, or the hero just dumber than the villain or antagonist, in order to facilitate drama. Where it's like, no, you got to be more creative than that, because the audience has to connect to these people. If the audience thinks that they're smarter than the characters they're watching, they're going to get bored and then tune out.
that's the problem I had with the Batman, but I'm not going to get into that. But that, well, on that point, I could jump off that, because the Riddler is a great example of a great villain, right? Like he's one of Batman's equals as far as being as smart as him, and it's usually just his hubris and his narcissism that gets to him in the end, right? And it's how Batman figures that out. Then we got John Eben Bear, who says, so Doctor Strange 2 is now the last Jedi of the MCU. It has some of the similar traits, but I don't know if it's going to reach
Nothing
that
was that
pinnacle.
bad.
It's not.
Yeah,
I
no.
would say it's nowhere near the level of betrayal.
Exactly, yeah.
that Last Jedi was.
I mean, I think there's comparisons to how, I think that's
There's
what
a
Andre
stronger-
was.
There's legitimately a stronger logic to what Wanda is doing compared to why Luke decides
Yes.
to abandon the Force.
Yes. I know Andre drew a few comparisons to that in his video, but yeah, I wouldn't say that it is overall. I think he was just talking about how the character was handled in some ways. Adam Wolford then comes in and says, I was promised Lovecraftian level of madness, but from what I'm hearing, there is no Lovecraftian horror. But instead of we getting CW Metadrama, no, that's not true. You get some of the Lovecraftian stuff, and you get some fun
good Raimi-isms in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of great shit in this movie. That's what really sucks most of all.
Absolutely.
Is that you have, like what Robert just said, that great intro. There's some other stuff I don't want to specifically give away, but is in the trailer, so I can kind of mention it. Like, you know, how you have the zombie version and he has, you know, the cool cape with all the arms and shit. Like, that's really cool. And there's some other really neat stuff in here that feels very Raimi, and you can tell he's having a little fun with that. But that's the other problem, is overall, that was my other big complaint with the movies. It just didn't feel like it was very fun. And I don't know if there was too much CW metadrama. There was some of that with America Chavez, but not nearly as cringe or whinge as some of the shit on CW at all. And it looks like Robert agrees with me. So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, look, I liked it. I had fun watching it. I just was like, you know, it felt like a summer annual to me.
Yeah, that's a good.
Well, you missed the beginning, and what
yeah.
I said. You know, this would have been better handled, Robert. I don't know if you agree with this. We already discussed this with everybody on the panel, so I'd just like to get your take on it. I said it would work better as a Disney Plus, like Avengers event level thing, where they could have conglomerated all the shows into this, have it be like a 3-4 episode thing, and call it Scarlet Witch, and have it just be the conclusion of all that shit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was like, look, as you know what I saw this as? To me, it felt like a late 60s Hammer horror film. And I really was looking
some of that.
I was looking at it from that perspective. Like I got out of it what I guess I wanted from it. Like look, I love the MCU overall. and this was the 28th MCU movie. And as a James Bond fan, we have 25 Bond movies. Barely half of them are watchable. I am a fan of B movies. You know, I I interviewed Shauna Tripsick, who is the costume designer on the new Designing Hollywood podcast. She was the costume designer of Mandalorian season 2 and Book of Boba Fett. The first movie that she ever worked on was, why are you barking? Was Stone Cold, that
She's
stars
trying to
Brian
correct
Bosworth
you.
and Lance Henriksen. It is not a great movie, but it's one of the great B movies ever. And Lance Henriksen is awesome in it as a biker gang boss. And so I can compartmentalize what I like. And so I told her, I said, you worked on a masterpiece. Stone Cold, starring former
Stone Cold
Seahawks
is
Brian
pretty
Bosworth. It's so good. And so I look at things, you know, you compartmentalize them. I don't expect all movies to be the greatest movies in the world. And I think that Doctor Strange was what it wanted to be. I think that it did not aspire to something and fall short. I think that Sam Raimi came back and was like, I'm happy to be directing this movie. I'm just going to make it gonzo and fun and all that. However, we, the audience, have bigger expectations for these movies.
That could very well be.
But I think that Sam Raimi made the movie he wanted to make. And I liked it on that level. I saw it as a friend helping another friend in need.
I agree with you to the point up until the reshoot, because it really makes me wonder how much say and sway he had in the reshoots, or if he would agree with them. And then going off of what, you know, we were reading before you got in here about the interview with Waldron, like, I mean, clearly, I mean, they still had to work within the parameters of the Marvel, you know, Kevin Feige kind of stuff. So I get what you're saying. And I felt some of the Raimi-isms in this, and I'm sure he probably is happy with it, especially after the fucking weekend it had, because outside of I think it beat his Spider-Man openings probably, but that's just because of inflation. But I mean, I'm sure it's looking very well for him overall. I mean, to him, this is a big deal to him, and I don't want to take anything away from him on that, because I did enjoy a lot of the film. I just felt like it wasn't a Doctor Strange sequel, because that was my biggest thing. Was like, I was like, okay, it starts off as a Doctor Strange sequel, and then not even 20 minutes in, it turns into Scarlet Witch movie, which would have been fine if I was advertised a Scarlet Witch movie. You know, that was my big issue.
Look, I mean, to be honest, the only movie that I really care about in the next 6 months is Crimes of the Future.
Really?
David Cronenberg's new film. I mean, I read that script over 20 years ago, and let me tell you, you're not ready. People are gonna watch, like you know, growing up with Cronenberg's movies, I think we've become complacent in terms of our films and what we're expecting. All I can say is that Crimes of the Future will not be, it's not going to be fun the way Infinity War and Endgame are fun. But
I don't mind something that'll shake things up. I don't necessarily have to have everything be fun.
I think Crimes of the Future is going to make.
But if you got something called Multiverse of Madness, I expect some fun out of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. I had fun.
Yeah,
I know I had some
fun
with it, but I didn't feel like the movie was very fun, I guess is the best way I can put it. But Mr. Tickletrunk says a new journey for Strange through might be as a teacher for the first time. 1, 2, a very young, upbeat, inexperienced girl. 2, older, anguished witch. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. But only he didn't really do much for Scarlet Witch. Mr. Tickletrunk says Strange is so self-sure he's too independent. Maybe getting Vision and others to help could be his arc. Learn to be a leader and not the star player. Yeah, this is, I think, going off of one of my, when I was talking a little bit more in depth about my idea of how it would work better as a, you know, Avengers style kind of meetup series for Disney Plus. I said then you would have had more of a reason to get like Hawkeye and Falcon and stuff like that involved, because they would have been one of the few Avengers left who would have known her, and they would have tried to talk her down, you know. And that's, you know, it's another point we brought up too. But it is a lost opportunity in that respect. Jim Guy says, shall we have Shuma Gorath as the main villain?
Yes. You should, but no. We had that one.
Mega J says it looked like Waldron has seen the increasing backlash of Wanda's character and is making excuses to try and justify and defend his writing. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why that article exists. This article here It's the only reason this exists is because he was clearly getting some backlash, and he felt it. No doubt about it. These kind of interviews and headlines don't write themselves, kids.
No.
Let's see here. Neil comes in with 999. How you doing, buddy? Says, I argue never read the comics. The Vincenti aren't in the movie. They bestow the title of Sorcerer Supreme. Heck, that makes the Sorcerer Supreme in the MCU. Dear Lord, they screwed up badly. Sigh. Yeah, we were talking about how Doctor Strange is no longer the Sorcerer Supreme. I don't know how you feel about that, Robert, but yeah.
Well, he was blipped.
Yeah, well,
was
people accept that aspect, but they were thinking like by the end of this film, he should have been Sorcerer Supreme again.
I actually kind of like the fact that he's not, because it gives him. I love Wong. I think
I don't mind Wong either.
Is awesome, but
yeah, Wong is great.
I love Benedict
comic,
Wong, and whenever he shows up, first of all, can I just say hot toy? Can I get a hot toy figure of Wong? You racists. Even though you're Chinese, give me Wong, man.
Now you'll get one. Now you've done that. Yeah.
I know. Give me a Wong. Why can't I have a Wong?
I will say I did point out that he's like the more responsible of the two, so that's why I can understand how he's Sorcerer Supreme in that respect.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do kind of like the idea of how like every time he's just like, just leave me out of it. He's like just kind of lets Doctor Strange do whatever he wants. He's just like, just leave me out of it.
Not only was he blipped, but remember what we talked about earlier about how in Spider-Man: No Way Home, that whole film is based upon Doctor Strange doing something extraordinarily stupid and irresponsible.
This is what I was going to say earlier, Clobby. I get exactly where you guys are coming from, and I agree with you, except for one point, and that is the point where Wong tells him he can't do it, right? And Strange is the kind of egotistical guy to where if you tell him he can't do something and he's pretty sure he can, he's gonna fucking do it anyway. But you're right. Like my issue is the way it played out with him and Peter afterwards. Then it kind of got a little like, okay, that was dumb.
But no, responsible enough.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was my thing. Is like I didn't have an issue with him going like, okay, Wong said you can't do it. Well, fucking A, right? He's gonna turn around and say, well, of course I can. You can't tell me what I can and can't do because I used to be the Sorcerer Supreme just because you are doesn't mean I can't do it. And I'm Doctor Strange and I can do whatever the fuck I want, right? Like that kind of attitude thing. But,
After his initial origin,
and just to prove he could.
Attitude, he didn't have that kind of attitude that is as much when he was.
No, you're right.
Doctor Strange in the comic, it was a little more.
And that's gone here too, and that's another problem, right? Like he's not playing that same kind of character. Like here, he's more the mentor. He's more responsible. He's more.
Yeah, it's really good in this. I don't know why people keep saying it's not his film.
No, I had a great time with his stuff, and that's what bothered me. I'm like, I want more Doctor Strange. I mean, he's in the movie quite a bit, but once it takes that turn towards the WandaVision stuff again, then it's like, because I was really disappointed by the end of WandaVision.
Right, that was a bad decision, even using Wanda with the film with him. They should have been separate, but.
Yeah. Are they just testing the waters to see if Wanda can hold her own in a movie? Like, well, do you like Scarlet Witch? Well, you should check out Doctor Strange too, because she's basically most of the movie.
Maybe, but I think the other part of it is too, they just kind of have to wrap up her storyline because I still swear a lot of these.
Another show.
Well, it's just they're getting more expensive, and every time they do one of these movies or shows, the price goes up and up and up and up. And yeah. Professor Gray says modern science fiction is stupid fiction, dumbed down hard for as wide an audience as possible. I think this is when we finally get into the Star Trek talk here a little bit. But this is very true. Very true indeed. Not very much good. Well, there's some good science fiction out there, but you got to dig for it. Mega J says, do you think John Watts knew what they were going to do with Mr. Fantastic, and that's why he pulled out of directing F4 movie? No, I really don't.
I don't think he cared.
I don't. I really think Watts saw this as the opportunity it was. He had just directed one of the biggest movies in a long time. He can go into any studio and say, "Let me make this movie," and they'll.
John Watts is going to direct Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie.
That could very well be too.
That's my theory.
That could very well be too.
I mean, that's also different enough. So yeah, there's nothing.
Which is funny because Waldron, the guy whose interview we were just reading, he's the guy who's writing that. Evidently. That's why I think they're gonna do it. I think Raimi's gonna direct Spider-Man 4 as well. I think that's gonna be one of the
I absolutely think so too.
Yeah.
I knew 100%. That was going to be part of the deal from the start. Yeah, Mr. Tickle Trunk then says R&B as always. Well, we got that one. I'm sorry. Yeah. But thank you again, Mr. Tickle Trunk. This says, in the video games Cyberpunk 2077, the flying cars and the cybernetic implants started in 1999 because of the old tabletop game. It was an alternate future. There's another example of extrapolating the future that was. There's there's that. Louis Berry says MOM is great. Wanda steals the show. Lizzie deserves an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actors. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Louis. Or Lewis. I think it's Louis, actually. Or is it Lewis? Does it have an E? I can't remember.
There's multiple
it's
spellings,
Lewis.
but yeah, you can go with it's whatever the person prefers.
Yeah, I
know
don't
a guy
wanna-
who spelled it Lewis, but went by Louis. So
Well, that's my grandpa's name, and I think he always spelled it with an E. So, or actually, I think he spelled it like that. I can't remember. I always fuck that up. E's throw me off. Mr. Grant Gregory says, "Hey, how you doing? Can you shout out Mad Barber Entertainment and sub?" Well, I already am, but I can shout it out. That's for sure. So I can't sub because I already am. But you guys should out there. I do pop in there quite often when they do their shows. Gonzalo Bergali says they are looking forward to putting human minds into robots so they can be whatever they want to be, just like Picard. That's the thing though, right? Like the Star Trek universe doesn't really lend itself well to that kind of an idea unless you're doing it as like an alien race or some kind of allegory. You cannot have a character, doing the things they do in a lot of these shows. Like they just don't get it, right? Like, because Robert's made this point many times over on here and in many other places, I'm sure, where like if you felt like you were born the wrong sex, well, at some point you would just get the operation and no one would know the wiser because you'd pretty much be biologically a woman or a man or whatever it was you changed sexes to, because at that point technology is so advanced that no one would be able to tell or give a fuck. That's the bigger thing, is they wouldn't give a shit.
Also, too, I mean, I honestly believe that trans human beings are real. This is not an anomaly. I think that it's an anomaly, but people who are actual really trans people, because I know many of them, they really were, whether they had too much estrogen in the womb or whatever, that there will come a time when you can demonstrably prove scientifically that truly trans people they were literally born in the wrong bodies. Their brain chemistry, a man is a woman is a man. We will be able to prove that at some point. And I think that in the future, in the Star Trek future, if that happens, if you're a natural childbirth, because who knows what technology could do, that when you were born, they probably could figure out a way to do all kinds of surgery to you, and they would adjust your mind to your body through surgery if that was the case, or whatever they needed to do. So anyone who's trans, you wouldn't be called trans anymore. You would just be transitioned to bring your mind into sync with your body. I absolutely believe this, because in my experience in the world and the people that I have met trans people. They are absolutely trans. 100%. It is not some kind of a mental disorder. They are absolutely people. They were literally, their spirit, their soul, call it what you want, were born in the wrong bodies, because scientifically it actually happened. But right now, we do not have the technology to prove that. And that is unfortunate. And I think one day we will. So in the future, this is what I cannot stand about modern Star Trek, is like when someone's talking about their fucking pronouns 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
When a deer, I'm like, are you kidding me? You have human beings are fucking aliens. And as they said in Cameron.
She's literally, actually. Her boyfriend.
Literally.
Yeah.
Cameron said, it doesn't matter if it's Octurian, baby. That's a line from Aliens.
Yep.
I mean, our sexuality, our vision of what all that means would be so expanded when you're in the United Federation of Planets. Our version of copulation and sexuality and religious beliefs would be so far expanded from what it is now. We're kindergartners right now.
Yeah.
And in the future, and it's maddening now to think, like, I can't convince anyone of this, but I have trans friends. I truly believe that they really are actually transgendered human beings, where they were born in the wrong body. Their brains, their brain chemistry, all of that, because of naturally occurring stuff in the womb, they were supposed to be, like, say, a man was supposed to be a woman was supposed to be a man. I believe that is real through my own experience, the people that I've known. Absolutely. It is not a disorder. It is an actual provable thing. The problem is We don't have the technology to prove it yet, but we will. And I think that in the future, if you extrapolate as a science fiction idea that that's the case, in the future, it wouldn't be a problem. If you want to transition and we have Star Trek technology in the 23rd century, people would just do that. They're like, oh, you got a little bit too much estrogen in your brain. You were born in the body of a man, but you're actually a woman. We'll fix that. Nobody would ever be the wiser. Nobody would ever care. It would be par for the course.
Yeah.
But we don't live in a world now where that is the case. So it's unfortunate.
And they wouldn't make a point of it. That's the whole.
I mean, what I don't,
yeah,
but they're like Sarek of Vulcan is having sex with a human woman. Like nobody cares. Like, of course,
Lord knows what
Star
Riker has fucked.
Oh my! I mean, right? I mean, look. If I was a guy like Riker traveling the universe, I would have sex with all kinds of aliens, whether they were human or not. Imagine the pleasure. What if you found some hentai like tentacled creature that could do all kinds of crazy things
I'd
to you,
run,
like
but
penetrate your body in ways you couldn't know? I mean, it could be amazing. Why limit ourselves? Like, if you really lived in a science fiction world and you really traveled, Captain Kirk, if you really got into the nitty gritty, think about the kind of creatures he's had sex with.
see,
That guy is
I
transcendent.
think Riker's worse, but yeah,
Could be same thing, but imagine. I mean, can you imagine having like every orifice penetrated? Your nose, your ears, your brain,
I'd
and
run.
it was all,
I'm
and
sorry.
somebody could pleasure your entire, physicality at once. Who's going to say no to that? It might be weird.
I
at
don't know.
first.
I might run like the Hulk.
That's because we're provincial. We're so human. All we can deal with is bipedal humanoid. But what if you met a creature that had 100 appendages that could do things to you haven't even imagined?
That's something we didn't see in Doctor
Cthulhu-like.
Strange.
You've been
Just
hanging out
saying.
with Brian Fuller too much.
Yeah, Mr. Tickle Trunk says R&B real Star Trek in the year 5000. We'd be fluffy pink clouds of pleasure having 100,000 IQ who manipulating the fabric of space. And
You're not wrong. I mean,
Yeah, that's way-
look in the Dune universe.
It's kind of what that
you
is.
eat
in a
enough
weird way.
spice, you become a sandworm.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, what happens there? I'm just saying that we are very provincial, and our visions of sexuality and pleasure is very limited.
Well, we're looking at it very terrestrial. Play the High Note says maybe Tom Cruise had a point about psychiatry. Well, that's a whole fucking can of worms.
Modern day psychiatry is actually rather fascinating because some of the patients are so young, and most psychiatrists don't actually give advice. They just listen and let the patients come to their own conclusions. And I think that's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you have anything to go by these writers, it seems that they went to psychiatrists because they had a superficial problem, made it out to be far bigger than what it was, then resolved it, and they're hung up on that resolution to think that they're actually secure people when they're probably nowhere near that. They left psychiatry and now they're putting it in their works as a writer, and
Right.
and the rest of us are suffering as a result.
Well, it takes away the responsibility. That's why. Adam Wolford says it will be like humans from Dune. Well, there you go. And bring them back. We will be outclassed and beyond the update. They would be 4 times stronger and smarter. We lose. Yeah.
Would we? I mean, I think that we're going to evolve. Well, the human animal, through our own ingenuity, through biotechnology, we're going to be able to do things. I think 1,000 years from now, human beings will be unrecognizable from today.
I don't know. I'm convinced aliens won't come near us because we do nothing but put crap in our bodies and watch porn all day.
I think,
Yeah, like they don't.
Yeah,
As if
They're
that's
probably
something.
afraid
As if
we're
there's
gonna
something
fuck
wrong.
them.
Yeah.
Well, no, they're probably afraid we're gonna fuck them.
well, regardless, I don't think humans will look much different aside from what we can.
I'm just fucking around.
What we
I
can
bet aliens do
mechanically
the
do
same
to us.
shit with them.
I don't think that we'd look much different what we can mechanically do to us, because one of the things that I learned in biology as an elective is that even if we were to, like, say, evolve to be an average height of like 7 or 8 feet tall and what have you, the organs have to catch up with us on that, and that's not always going to be the case. And on top of that, it's not so much that it's the survival of the fittest, but what we've actually learned is that it's the species that best fits in the environment that has the advantage, as opposed to just the strongest and the toughest and the largest.
Yeah.
Because that's how it works. So I think I think genetically speaking, I don't think it'd be any difference from us now as there would be to 1,000 years ago. But I think it's the modifications that we can do with technology, like, as you suggested, like bio implants and things of that nature,
Yeah.
which I am terrified of. I don't want to have battery operated items in my body. It just doesn't seem right.
Adam Wolford says, no, Robert, it's more like the web from 40K. I think he was talking about the
Warhammer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mecca J says R&B is the Star Trek brand beyond saving at this point. That's a good question.
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, all you have to do is have one great story. Well, one great
show or movie that fits within what's made Star Trek, really.
I mean, what's so strange is Strange New Worlds. People are like, oh, it's a return to form. It's Star Trek, the original series light. Like they're trying to recreate something that already created the Star Trek brand. It's so bizarre because people always say to me, you're an old man shouting at clouds. Here's that Simpsons meme. That's not what I want. I want new transcendent storytelling. I want great stories well told. I don't want to watch like B grade rehashes of stuff that's already happened. That's what Strange New Worlds is. It is a weird, uncreative, politically correct, pandering show.
Yeah.
That is written by people that see Star Trek in a pop culture lens. Like, they don't look. Star Trek, if you don't approach Star Trek like it's fucking Shakespeare, you will lose because you think you're slumming and you're not, and you'll never take it seriously. Star Trek, all those people, they think Arena is funny.
Yeah.
You're right, they do.
That's what they think. They think Arena, the Gorn's in a TV commercial. And that's the fucking problem. They do not understand why Arena is a great episode of television because they can't look at it the way it was seen back when it was originally aired. They're like, it's just a wacky, goofy. It's they think of it as a Godzilla film from the 60s.
Right.
And when you do that, you will never get Star Trek. You're
well, that right there is why they do what they do now with modern Trek, right? I mean, because that's the thing is Kurtzman actually has less stipulations as far as I know than JJ did, but they're doing it out of just pure they think it looks hokey, right? They don't want the classic shit. They don't want to make something look like it's uniform because to them, just like you just said, it's like a Godzilla film to them. They don't want to do it that way, even though they had the audacity to use footage from the cage and then show the aliens looking completely different in the show and try to blur that line between, what's canon and prime and all that business. But yeah, like that's the thing is they treat it like it's embarrassing, which that's what pisses the fans off.
Yeah, but they do. All the people writing Star Trek think that they're writing some like pop art thing from the 60s that they don't, right. None of it matters. They don't when we get mad at something, whether Pike calls now Kirk's brother Sam, we get mad.
His name's
we
George.
get mad at that. They think it's all ridiculous. And I'm like, I'm like, you haven't done your research. You just you've Wikipedia'd it, but you haven't figured it out. You don't understand why Robert, Picard's brother. Where was Picard's brother in Picard? Patrick Stewart probably doesn't even remember that he used to have a brother as Picard. He doesn't know.
No, of course not.
He's an actor.
Yeah, like he doesn't even visit the family grave because, again, in generations, his brother, his sister-in-law, and nephew die in a fire. That's the impetus of that, and he doesn't even regard it. But I think you actually kind of nailed something else. Do you remember in when Star Trek: The Next Generation had a couple of you obviously should remember this, had a couple of features with regards to like DeForest Kelley walking the set of the TNG set, and all he does is talk about like how impressive and how great the budget is on this and how they wish they had that in the 60s. I think modern Star Trek producers are getting the wrong idea from that because it's all about the budget and the presentation, but it's forgetting about the heart. Like, I think they're interpreting that when D. Kelley said, we never had this type of technology on our sets. They're getting the message like D. Kelley was embarrassed by the sets at the time that he was doing it, which is not what he's saying at all. He's just saying like he's just impressed by the growths in technology and set design and everything they had, because the sets of the original series were really incredibly impressive.
Incredibly impressive. I mean, everybody they act like Star Trek is a Saturday morning cartoon or like
they think
Land
it's like
of
an
Lost.
affiliate television show, like a TV show that's made at one of those affiliate stations that
Marty
had
Krofft.
no money, no budget. They had to use like paper scraps. It's like they had a lot of money. It was very expensive, but they also had to be very creative for things that they just couldn't do because there was nothing there. Which is why, yes, sure, there's a corridor in an episode of Star Trek which is made from lids from coffee cups, spray painted silver. But it's basically they're on a schedule and they'd only have so much money to spend and so much time to get it done. And they're looking at normal things in unique and creative ways, which is exactly what you're supposed to do when you build a set. Doesn't matter if it's science fiction or if it's like a set for freaking General Hospital. You got to do it in that time.
No, and what I think that's the big disconnect is most of the people that work on Star Trek now, they didn't watch Star Trek when they were growing up. They watched it because they got a job working on Star Trek and they go back and look at it and they're looking at it. They can't like when I watch a say film noir film from the 40s that's in black and white because color hadn't been invented yet. When I'm watching a black and white film from the 40s, I understand it's from that era. And I do not judge it by today. I understand that if and two of my favorite movies of all time are Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve. You know, both black and white, both noir films. I mean, All About Eve did win Best Picture in 1950. Mm-hmm. To me, it's one of my favorite. I think it's one of the greatest screenplays ever written, and the characters are amazing. If you try and watch it today, a modern audience is going to have a really hard time grappling with the way it's shot, the language, the way the characters are portrayed, all of that. And many people are going to reject it out of hand. Like, this is ridiculous. I can't watch this. And it's because it's from a different era. The whole idea, when I watch All About Eve, I have a filter in my mind that immediately takes into consideration this movie came out in 1950. It's 72 years old. Mm-hmm. So I don't judge it by today's standards.
Yep.
Very few people have the ability to do that. I had to train myself growing up as a film fan, you know, since I was a little kid watching 50s science fiction films. The people that make Star Trek now never took Star Trek seriously. It was always a pop culture artifact of the past that they looked at and they're like, well, we can update it. We can make it cool for today. And you can see it. It's so, which is incredibly short-sighted, and they do not understand what they're doing. And you can see that starting in 2009, where you know, Kirk's riding motorcycles and driving 300-year-old cars off cliff, and they're playing the fucking Beastie Boys, Sabotage. Horrible. Like, when was the last time you heard Sabotage on your Spotify playlist or whatever? Even now it's dated. And yet in 2009, and I love the Beastie Boys, but give me a fucking break. That would be like me in a car chase having a string quartet playing Schubert behind me. I mean, it's ridiculous. And yet they don't get it. They don't understand.
I think that's a very poignant reflection on how terrible our education system has been, because you don't have that exposure. Like, that's one of the things I'm so grateful for my parents is we have in Canada, we had a public network called Television Ontario. And every Saturday night they had a special called Saturday Night at the Movies. They would play a classic film and they'd have interviews. The host would interview various people from that production. And that's what I grew up watching first. Yep. So I would see Forbidden Planet. And then later that week, I would see on television the original Star Trek. And I'm like, oh, these are kind of the same things. And I'm a kid.
Yeah, I mean, Roddenberry, that was the inspiration for Forbidden Planet, which, by the way, is a Shakespeare adaptation of The Tempest.
Exactly. It comes in full circle to a degree. Like, you want, even though as I got older, I realized, like, Shakespeare's very valuable, but in regards to his plays over the Pantheon, his plays are very much like the sex, drugs, and betrayal of like kind of like an old school, or not really old school, but kind of like an adjacent trash type of thing, but not trash as in bad, as in it's kind of like just, you know, sexy drama type of off the cuff thing as well. But it has a nuance to it that allowed Shakespeare to last over 500 years in the culture. And there's something to be said about that. And then today, what we end up getting is, instead of someone who has, it doesn't even matter if you really have to like study knee deep into it. You just have to sort of get beyond the surface level of it to see, why is it working this way? What caught on to people of the time when this was published and done? Because this is the foundation of the very industry that you are working in today. And if you, it's like building a house. If you don't know how to dig out a basement for a foundation, you're not going to be able to build a very soundly structured home.
Right. By the way, I'm since Tom, you put this up, Mecha J says, RMB, have you seen Paul Chatto's interview with Vic Mignogna on his channel Call Me Chatto, and how he created Star Trek Continues? I have to say that I didn't know Paul Chatto. I know he's a comedian and he's a former network executive, but over the last couple months, his channel came into my orbit, and I like the guy. He and I definitely are simpatico when it comes to Star Trek. I did watch his interview with Vic Mignogna, and of course, Vic, I think that Star Trek Continues is it's terrific as far as a fan series goes. It's the Tiffany standard. I mean, you know, I worked on Axonar with Alec. Alec and Vic have a long history. I've only met Vic once. I met Vic at a brunch at Doug Drexler's house, who works on Star Trek. Doug's a legend. He's an Academy Award-winning makeup artist for Dick Tracy, and he's the biggest Star Trek fan in the world. I love him and his wife to death. And I was working on Axonar, and I sat down with Vic, and Vic has pretty high hair, you know. And I said to him, I go, dude, this is what I said to him. I go, you and I should start a Flock of Seagulls cover band, and we should sing Iran. And he was not having any of that. I don't think he thought it was funny, and maybe it's because he knew I was involved with the enemy camp or whatever. But I really appreciated everything they did. I thought Star Trek Continues, when it wasn't all about Vic and they had great scripts, I thought it was great. I thought they did some really great stuff. There be dragons and Lorelei or whatever.
Lolani, I think it was
Lolani.
Yeah,
that's
Lolani.
what it was. Lolani. I like
Yeah,
that.
that was a good one.
I thought they did some really, really great stuff. I like the last 2 episodes they did. They did some really clever stuff. But on the other hand, then they did some stuff that I really, really hated. Like they did a Mirror Universe episode, and in the Mirror Universe episode, they replayed, because Vic wanted to play the entire scene from the end of Mirror Mirror, so he could say, you know, be the captain of the Enterprise, find a reason for sparing the Hulkins, and make it stick. He wanted to do that. And I'm like, okay, what would have been really cool is, I love Mirror Mirror. It's one of my favorite episodes of the original series.
Me too.
I've always wondered what happened on how did the Mirror Universe crew that was on our Enterprise get to the transporter room to beam over when our crew that we'd followed, I always wanted to know that. And here was an opportunity where they could have shown that. They could have shown, how did Mirror Kirk get on the transporter platform to have our Spock beam him over and make that transposition? They didn't do that. You know, they just replayed. I know, and I'm like,
how did the good Spock figure it out so that he could restore everything with? Yeah.
And that was when I was like, you guys are good, but you're not that good.
He did say, Spock did say in Mirror Mirror that they'd returned to their universe. You know, he assumed that they returned at the same time that Kirk would come back.
Yes. I am being summoned. I must leave, Jensen.
Well, we do have this for you. Echo Base says, R&B Top Gun 2 is my most anticipated movie at this point. How much do you recommend seeing this film in theater? I think you saw it already.
I have seen Top Gun 2. Bruh. I have to tell you, I have not had that much fun in a theater in a very long time.
Mhm.
I loved it. Now, is it high art? No. I love the original Top Gun. It's an 80s music video confection. Not only is Top Gun Maverick a great movie, it's a men on a mission movie, which I was surprised by. It has an amazing sense of melancholy that I did not expect. And the action scenes and the aerial photography are unlike anything you've ever seen. I loved Top Gun 2. I loved it. Now, it's still Top Gun Maverick. It's not Godfather. But it's astonishing how good and how entertaining it is. And I will tell you this, I swear to God, I cried in this movie, and I couldn't believe I did so. There's a moment in this movie where I literally cried.
There's your recommendation. Darren
But
Moose
I
says,
must go. Oh, I'll answer
got a couple
this.
more real quick for you. Darren Moose says R&B knows what hentai is. What is your experience with adult Japanese animation?
Okay, the first hentai I ever saw, I owned on Laserdisc, and it was called Yuratsuki Doji, or as we know it, The Wandering Kid.
Overfiend.
Overfiend. Yeah, the Legend of the Overfiend. That was it. And then, I mean, all the way up to things like, well, I'll flat out say it. I love Bible Black. I'll say it, you know. I find it very entertaining. Cthulhu meets Clive Barker. What's not to love?
Gonzalo
you know,
Bergali.
and also like Wicked City, you know, and stuff like that. I mean, I like Japanese, and I really, it's not just hentai. I mean, I see hentai as an offshoot of Japanese animated horror, and like I really loved in the 80s Vampire Hunter D, and there's a lot of really great Japanese horror, animated horror. But you know, I really like the fact that the Japanese had no fear combining extreme sexuality and evil horror together. I like that.
Gonzalo Bergali says R&B look into Chimera twins. It's an actual thing.
I will.
There you go. And I believe that's the last one
that.
for you. So thank you so much for being here, sir. We appreciate any time we get with you. Hopefully you have a lovely evening, and hope we get to talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Take care, sir.
I will see. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for being here, man. Take care. All right. And then Darius Munchausen, I believe this is some popcorn. Correct me if I'm wrong, Six.
It's popcorn.
It's popcorn. Hey. Buttered popcorn, baby.
Hey.
And then we got SP4H, who says, my theory about aliens, Earth is a drive-through safari, and the aliens get out to feed us are the ones that cause the UFO sightings.
I like it.
That's
I like it.
Making marks in cornfields, right?
Or a petting zoo. Maybe they just that's why they probe the cows. I don't know. That could be. This. Anyone remember that episode on The Simpsons where they added that dog in the Itchy and Scratchy? Yes, that would be the Poochie episode with the voice of Homer. That is now Star Trek.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Then Douglas, hey, how you doing, Doug? We showed your image earlier. Says Kurtzman didn't know Picard had a brother who appeared in a very significant TNG episode, but did know Kirk's brother, even though he only appeared for a second in TOS as a dead body.
Played by William Shatner, yeah, with a mustache.
Yep.
This is the equivalent.
Was mentioned in a couple of episodes, like and the one with Corby, I can't remember the name. It's just skipping me.
That's What Are Little Girls Made Of?
What Are Little Girls Made Of? Yeah, he mentions the brother. He's like, yeah, you have a brother, George Samuel Kirk, who only you call Sam.
call him Sam. But then, yeah, that's absolutely
but then
right.
Pike's calling him Sam. It's like, why?
Yeah.
You would call him George. He's George Jr. technically.
Right, but exactly, and then in Operation Annihilate, he just calls him Sam. And these idiots who did this crap, obviously between the certain coke lines, one night they were switched to MTV, and they see Operation Annihilate, one of the 70 writers in that horrible room for Strange New Worms, and they decided, hey, there's a member berry for you. We'll put Samuel Kirk on the show.
Yeah,
and I don't think Samuel Kirk officially was ever really a part of Starfleet. He was a member of the Federation and scientist for something, but I don't think he was ever an officer.
And even if he had been on the Enterprise before, it's so stupid.
I think this sums it up best.
Well, thank you, Dr. Malcolm, but I think things are a little bit different than you and I had feared.
Yeah, I know. They're a lot worse. Yeah, don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
Yep.
Yes, sir.
One of the greatest.
It is great.
bits. And with that, you guys are one of the greatest audiences ever. Thank you so much. And I want to thank this panel. You guys are one of the greatest panels ever. We got Clobby. Thank you for hopping in here, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Go on over and check out Clobby's channel. You got anything coming up in the near future you want to plug?
Well, tomorrow night, the great Michael French of Retro Blasting will be joining me. About a year ago, we did a ranking the MCU movies last year, and now we're going to do sort of an update show to that because there's been things added to it. He wanted to talk about some MCU, so Michael French of Retro Blasting and I will be talking MCU tomorrow.
I will try to hop in chat for that. Yeah,
please do. Please do.
I miss Mike. Six, anything you got coming up you're going to be appearing on or anything?
Not till this weekend.
Okie dokie. Did you want to plug it at all or?
No.
All right, then. Then we also have Screw Up Doctor. Anything you got going on in the near future you want to plug?
No, just you and I got to figure out if we got time for this Saturday. Or
I
think we might have to have it, but
if we
double check some things.
Let's say if we can't do it Saturday, maybe Sunday.
Yeah, maybe Sunday. Yep.
So, yes, we are going to be bringing back A-rated B movies and B-rated A movies. And yes, I should be doing 4K for you tomorrow night. And then Zero, our discussion with Jim sends in, what is that, Filipino, I believe? 25? Doesn't say anything, but just sending in some support. Well, thank you so much, 0 Hour Discussions with JM Cruz. I appreciate that. So yeah, check out everybody's channel. Check out is it called the Burn Network anymore? Or did he change
It's called the Post Geek Singularity.
The Post Geek Singularity. That's what I thought. Yeah, the Post Geek Singularity. That's where you can find Robert Meyer Burnett, and of course, head on over to 32 Flavors of Nick Weiser's channel, where hopefully I'll be joining them in a little bit here for the Rocky 2 discussion, if they're not too far into it already. But I definitely got to try and get something to eat here at some point too. Other than that, was there anything else anybody wanted to bring up before we take off here?
Just to thank you for having me, buddy. I'm honored. Appreciate it. And great to see you, Script, and great to see you, Six, as always. Thank you. And great.
Yeah.
And hail to the chat.
Great show. You guys are awesome in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yes, thank you. Six, anything?
No, I got nothing. Thanks, everybody.
All right. And with that, it is time for Spider-Man at the Oscars.
Jada, G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? Uh-oh, Richard. Oh.